My dog found me. But something's wrong with him. I've always gone hunting with my dog, Axel. He's a large husky. We live high up in the mountains, however, one hunting trip he ran off and went missing, which is weird because he almost never left my side. Me and Axel were just laying down beside each other. I had my firearm locked on this one deer, when all of a sudden I heard a twig snap beside us. Axel darted his head towards the noise, not losing focus for a second. The bushes of which the noise came from started rustling and he snapped. That was when he disappeared. Axel sprinted towards the noise, however I didn't stop him. He didn't return for 3 days and I started to doubt he'd ever come back, but my suspicions were shot down when I woke up to his whining at my door. I checked the time, 2:45 a.m. I tiredly sat up, rubbing my head. He whined once more, and that's when I realized. Axel? To say I was overjoyed is an understatement. I yanked the door open to see him sitting there with a coyote's foot in his mouth. You catch your own food, bud? His head nodded a bit, almost as if he could understand me. I quickly let him inside. I wasn't too shocked to see he had survived. He was practically a mini wolf. His thick fur coat could withstand the strongest of snowstorms, while his bite could pierce bare skin. A week went by and I started to notice his odd behavior. He didn't run up to me and beg whenever I ate, he didn't sit beside me whenever I watched TV, instead, he would lay down under my feet and whine. I went out for another hunting trip, but this time, without Axel. Sorry bud, I don't need you running off again, you stay put. I grabbed my gear and headed out. Once I reached my usual spot, behind a log by a frozen creek, I saw him. I recognized his deep blue eyes. Axel. What the hell are you doing out here? I told you to stay. I paused. Axel's foot was dragging on the snow. It was leaving a contrasting trail of blood. I ran over to him, Jesus Christ. His foot was missing, then it hit me. The dog that came to my door wasn't Axel. Almost a perfect replica, its thick fur, the way it walked, the way it barked at any noise that came from outside, but its eyes. Its eyes were a baby blue. Axel's were almost a navy color. I hugged my dog tight. What is in my house, then?
My husband keeps getting off by my childhood trauma even though I've asked him not to. I've tried everything. Nothing is working. Thinking of divorce. Please don't waste your time on the age gap. It's something I've dealt with for our whole relationship and I don't want to get lectured about it. I've been with my husband for 6 years, married for 2. I know he's older but he looks very youthful for his age and he's super fit and active, so honestly the age was never an issue, ever. Between the ages of 10 and 15 I was essayed by my stepdad, and when I first started getting serious with my now husband, I told him everything, all the details, all the ways it screwed me up and all the horrible aftermath and fallout from various family members. In short, it was all bad, in every which way you can imagine. Within the last 4 months, every time my husband and I make love, it starts out normal but at some point he always starts asking questions about the times I was essayed. He gets real graphic and because we're in the moment, I always answer his questions. I'm not a prude by any means and I even have my own personal likings which he always enjoys, but lately it seems his only thing to get off to is hearing me talk about the most traumatic time in my life. The questions he asks are so gross and so personal and he's never asked these before. The concerning part is he seems to get excited about the details as I answer his question because he always finishes super fast once he starts asking these questions. I've sat him down several times and told him how it makes me feel less than, how it hurts me, how it makes me feel like trash, how it brings me back to a horrible time, and I've told him to stop. He always apologizes about it and says he won't do it anymore, but then we start making love and whether it's 10 minutes, 20 minutes or one of our longer sessions, he always ends up bringing it up near the end of our session, a few minutes before he finishes. I write this in my bed alone as I've asked him to sleep on the couch tonight because he just did it again after I repeatedly tell him not to. I don't know what my next move is. I'm tempted to leave but I don't work and would have to take him to court to get some type of support so I can live, and I know that stuff takes time. I still love him and he's a great husband in every other sense, but this whole thing is turning me off and slowly but surely making me fall out of love with him. If he really loved me, why would he continually hurt me like this? Also, is it possible he is a perv, liking that stuff? How is this new? I've known him for years and he's never mentioned this as being a turn on. Any advice would be appreciated. I have no family and friends here as I'm new to the city we live in and my family lives in a different country. Thank you. Update. My husband and I have decided to separate for the time being as I can't really get over just how weird and hurtful he's been over the past few months. He is currently letting me stay in the house until we figure out the next steps, and although he keeps apologizing, I've decided to leave him and start my life over. To everyone telling me to go back to my home country, I can't, it's not so easy. I did however call my family and told them everything and they were surprisingly supportive, and we've talked every day since my original post and I couldn't be happier about that. To everyone who left me horrible messages, I'm sorry you're so full of hate and wish horrible things on people, but I will end up stronger than ever after this, so thank you. My husband has been nothing but supportive in my wanting to leave and start over, so all I can do is figure it out and take the advice of my family and my lawyer. Yes, I've been in contact with a lawyer but haven't hired her yet as I'm waiting to get the money from my husband who has volunteered to pay for it. Thanks again. Hope this update was sufficient for everyone.
Girls ask, men answer.
Does your girlfriend need to be perfectly fit? What do you look for in a girl? I think we know no one is perfect, and we just want someone that we can talk to comfortably, also someone that you love and find cute, that's it.
If a girl is overweight, does anyone have a crush on her, or do people not like her because she is fat?
Some guys like chubby girls, even the gym rats. My personal trainer, for example.
I was a misogynist until I had a daughter. When I was a teenager, I was a misogynist. A lot of my friends and the other guys at my school were, so it was kind of the norm for me. I wasn't malicious about it, but I thought women were dumber and more emotional than men and saw them as inferior. Anyway, I got a girlfriend and she ended up getting pregnant when I was 20. I really wanted it to be a boy and was disappointed when we found out it was a girl. I thought we'd never connect and I didn't want to deal with a dramatic and emotional girl, but as soon as she was born, I loved her more than I ever thought I could love someone. As she started growing up and developing her own personality, I realized that girls and women are just regular people too. She's 16 now and she's so smart, sweet, and hilarious. She makes dirty jokes, listens to rap, and plays video games, just like I did as a teen boy, and whenever I see her dealing with misogyny, it makes me feel so bad that I had that mindset before I had her. It's sad that so many men don't see women as people until they have a daughter and start to see misogyny from the woman's side.
I ruined my own intimacy life overnight and it almost cost me the love of my life. But everything changed after I got the best intimacy advice ever. My boyfriend Josh and I first got together during our senior year of high school. Although we were both awkward teenagers, we fell deeply in love and continued dating after high school. Our initial intimacy life was explosive. The more things we tried together in bed, the closer it brought us. Josh had always been an animal in bed and he doesn't stop until I'm nothing but a quivering mess. Despite working in a trade since high school, Josh had always made time for me and now he makes steady money running his own small business. Meanwhile, I chose to take out student loans in order to attend my dream school, but I was a fool to think I could juggle all my new responsibilities while also keeping my relationship healthy and exciting. My boyfriend insisted on paying the majority of the bills so I could use my part-time job's paychecks for my student loans. Still, the longer we lived together the guiltier I felt about not contributing. Since Josh was the boss he had always worked long hours and he made sure all of our bills were paid on time. Yet something inside me kept telling me I was nothing but a parasite and that Josh deserved better. So, even though I was already feeling worn out between my job and my classes, I started working extra hours in secret out of desperation. My schedule was packed to the brim, as was my mind with stress, leaving no time or energy for my once exhilarating relationship. Josh tried not to question me about my increasing stress, but I could tell he was worried about me and I could feel the distance growing between us. It started with our intimacy life. We went from being intimate 5 times a week or more to maybe once a week if I wasn't too exhausted. After a while, it felt like every time he initiated, my body would just close up and my mind would drift. Everything hit rock bottom one night when I faked my climax for the first time with him. I had never been so disgusted and ashamed of myself. I felt like a liar and an awful girlfriend. But I was just drained from my busy schedule. By the end of the day, no matter how hard I tried to relax, my stress completely stopped allowing me to unwind in bed. Josh had never made love to me without all his passion and strength, but I found my mind wandering to homework or bills even while he was inside me. This had never been a problem for us. I missed the days when I could lose myself in his body, and he could bring me over the edge, again and again until we eventually finished together. But now, even during everyday conversations with Josh I couldn't help feeling distracted and aloof. I even had the awful realization that my last climax had been weeks ago. I knew I had to find some sort of solution to our bedroom issues, or it might eventually rip us apart. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't lose him. Not when what we used to have had been so perfect up until now. So I decided to visit my older sister to get some guidance. All her relationships had been long-term and her dating advice has rescued me in countless situations. I told my sister everything about how I had been feeling and me and my boyfriend's diminishing intimacy life. I surprised myself when tears rolled down my face as I asked her what I should do if my boyfriend left me because I wasn't satisfying him anymore. She comforted me in that mean older sister way and told me that all I needed to do was find a way to relax in bed, and that she had a couple of recommendations. She mentioned focusing on my breath, random foreplay tips, and practicing mindfulness, but nothing I hadn't tried before. My ears only perked up when she brought me using aphrodisiacs. She said she had tried multiple over the years but the strongest and quickest was called lust pills and came in a pink bottle. She discovered them during her weight loss journey. I was embarrassed to tell my boyfriend that I needed help to fix our private intimacy life, so I began taking the pills in secret. After only the first week, I began to feel my body loosen up and relax again. Suddenly, when he would kiss me I felt my knees go weak, and heat between my legs. It was like magic and I knew that a fire inside me was relighting. After only a couple of weeks of taking the lust pills, I finally climaxed again for the first time in months. I had forgotten how powerful and euphoric the sensation was, forgotten just how well Josh knew my body. The more our intimacy life improved, the more peaceful I felt in my day-to-day life and all of my responsibilities suddenly felt easier to manage. My new excitement about coming home and seeing Josh each night made me feel way less stressed about studying long hours or being on my feet all day at work. In bed with him, my skin had never felt so sensitive, and every sensation was so heightened that it was impossible to think about anything else during intimacy except the intense pleasure passing through me in waves. My boyfriend commented on the change he saw in me, telling me that he wasn't sure what it was but he had never been so attracted to me, and that every time I walked in the door he not only wanted me, but he needed me. We were uncontrollable teenagers falling in love all over again and over time we began exploring and experimenting. just like we used to. We had been living like uncomfortable roommates for months before I started taking the lust pills, but the next thing I knew we were spending most of our free time in bed together with our clothes all over the floor. Our bodies were rediscovering one another, connecting on a level deeper and more passionate than either of us could have ever imagined. It was then, during one of those lazy weekends, lying there on his bare chest, that I looked up at him and knew he was the man I would marry. The realization fell on me like a warm blanket, and I knew then that everything was going to be all right. Although I was appreciative to my sister for saving my relationship with her golden advice, I could have never felt so loved and whole without my beautiful boyfriend and his giant heart. I ruined his and his little trashy fling's life. Cheating ex-flaunt side chick loses his job and she gets graduation dress burned into oblivion. This happened almost 10 years ago, so even if dots get connected, I know I'm safe as per our laws. This didn't actually happen to me, but I executed the revenge. In my last year of middle school, I introduced my best friend, whom I'm gonna call Lily, to one of my arts classmates, who I'm gonna call Crappy. They dated for around 7 years, all through high school and uni, until she found right after graduation Crappy'd been cheating on her with his classmate from uni, Catty Cat. Lily and Crappy took language lessons at a small school next to a big shopping mall, and after their breakup, I went with her there so she could cancel her classes. I'd been giving her grand speeches about how life would take care of teaching the guy a lesson, all this crap. After being done with cancellation fees, papers, and all, we went into the mall for a feel-better dessert, and guess who was there at the food court? Crappy, who spotted me and Lily right away, and Catty Cat, who looked as white as a ghost. Crappy literally dragged Catty Cat towards us, who were both frozen because, can you believe it? And forced Catty Cat, who clearly wanted to be anywhere but there, to greet Lily, and asked Lily, "Are you not gonna talk to me?" All the while with a disgusting grin. I pulled Lily from there without a word. We left the mall, walked to the bus stop, all in silence. After I had digested what had just happened, I told Lily, "You know what I said about life? Forget it, it's gonna take too long." I know what I did afterwards was illegal, and only later would I realize how catastrophic it could have been. Lily still had all of Crappy's passwords, bank account, email, cell phone, etc., and he had hers. As soon as we got home, she'd been staying with me since the breakup, I made her change all her passwords, and asked her for his email. That's all I wanted. In our country, WhatsApp is the most used social media, and we often set it to backup daily into our Google Drive or Gmail. Crappy had his backup on Gmail. I skimmed through 2 years' worth of conversation with Catty Cat, complete with pics and audio files, and screenshots/cropped out the most interesting parts, such as them talking about intimacy in the restrooms and emergency exit at Crappy's work during his shift, bragging about how they blinded their partners to have their escapades. Turns out Catty Cat was married. Now, I was going to send the clippings of doom to Crappy's family, he was their golden boy, but I got a better idea after learning how bad they had effed up. So I tracked down Crappy's boss on LinkedIn, got his work email, found Catty Cat's husband on Facebook and, using a throwaway account, sent them the bomb. Heard through the grapevine Crappy got fired, but cried, literally, for a second chance, and was on probation at work. One more F up and bye-bye. Not the outcome that I wanted, but may. Fast forward a few months, I was talking to my cousin and she was telling me about how her fiancé's colleague was traveling all over the world, and he recently posted some pictures at a bar made of ice, and she wanted to travel there too. She showed me the picture the guy had posted. Lo and behold, traveling colleague was Catty Cat's ex-husband, Rick. I asked her how she knew Rick, and she told me he was her fiancé's friend and work colleague. I didn't tell her about my shenanigans, only said Rick's ex-wife and my best friend's ex had cheated on her, and inconspicuously, I hope, asked my cousin how Rick was, how it must have been a sad breakup for him, and did she spill the tea. So, Catty Cat had introduced Rick to Crappy during her graduation ceremony a few weeks before I sent the bomb, saying, "Look, this is the friend who helped me with my graduation project." Rick had allowed Crappy and Catty Cat to use his computer at home for said project. Turns out, they were fucking on his bed while he was working his butt off to pay for her sorry one, and she made him shake hands with her lover. Rick was a programmer, Catty Cat was from the countryside, and she'd been living in the city with him for a few years. Rick had an awesome salary, he paid for everything so Catty Cat could focus on uni. But one day, he received some evidence his wife was cheating on him, with the guy he'd shaken hands, the same guy he allowed to use his computer, in his house, to help his wife do her graduation project. Rick got her graduation dress, set it on fire, shoved her into the car, drove all the way to her family's home in the countryside, reportedly, dragged her into her parents' house by the hair, made her kneel and tell her mother and father what she'd been doing. Her father was so distressed, he had a minor stroke, and her mother kicked her out and cut her off from the family. As far as I know, last I checked was 5 years ago, they were still no contact. Rick threw her out of his house, she moved in with Crappy's family, and Rick, now with his salary beach-free, was living la vida loca going to ice bars in neighboring countries. And I was desperate. Had Rick been 1% madder, he could have burned her along with the dress. Her father could have died after my interference. I didn't calculate how Rick could react at all. I called Lily, told her all about it, lost my sleep over it for weeks, Even considered confessing to what I did. Lily asked me to let it go, what was done, to take this as a lesson and let life run its course the next time, as I'd initially said it would. I'm not proud of it, and even though I don't lose sleep over it anymore, I still feel somewhat guilty. Confessing here is kind of cathartic, though.
People with expired NDAs, what's the information you can now tell us? I had an NDA at the daycare I worked at. When I started, I worked with this crazy woman, let's call her Brenda, in the infant room. Now, Brenda was probably in her 60s but dressed like a 20-year-old in the 80s. I remember a spirit day we did that she showed up in a snakeskin miniskirt and knee-high Converse stilettos. Brenda was terrible with children, forcing them to eat by shoving spoons of hot porridge in their mouths and holding their head. She would barely burp the kids, force me to change all of the kids, and never did any activities with them, even though that was the selling point of this daycare. I was left to do all the paperwork and enrichment. She also discussed being hurt in various ways with bottles in the parking lot by her boyfriend who she stalked. I went to management more than once to voice my concern about her. She was a danger to kids. They told me, and so quote, be mean to her until she leaves. You know the boss won't fire her. Apparently, the daycare manager would get a good bonus if she didn't have to fire anyone, so she refused to do it. All the staff were underpaid, overworked, and the staff higher up were really good friends with the parents of some of the most annoying kids in the daycare. You couldn't do anything with those kids, their parents let them run the daycare and wondered why no one could get anything done. I had one of the kids say something incredibly rude and yell at me and her mom. Then the assistant manager came in and blamed me for the actions of the kid, and apologized to her mom and assured her I will do better in teaching her kid. Excuse me? We were always told when parents were touring so we could put our best face on. When you tour a daycare, you are not seeing what the daycare is like. Teachers in other rooms were regularly yelling at kids, pulling arms, putting kids in timeouts, and not letting them eat with everyone if they acted up. Which is all incredibly not okay. If you tried to do everything the right way, it would take longer and you would get in trouble for not staying on schedule. I was invited to a pure romance party within my first week working there during class. There was a designated crying and screaming room. One of the parents pulled their kid out of the daycare and left a well-earned 1-star review on Google, and the boss required every parent that worked at the daycare to leave a review. Even relatives who never set foot in the building were putting in reviews loaded with BS. So the grandmother of the kid wrote a review pointing that out as well. 2 1-star reviews don't stack up against 10 5-star reviews on Google, so no one really knows how bad it is.
My husband was racist to my newborn baby because he thought I cheated. Now that he knows the truth, he's begging for my forgiveness. I gave birth to my daughter 6 months ago, and it should have been the happiest moment in my life. When my daughter was born, her skin was very dark and looked like she could have 2 biological parents who were of African descent. My husband Jim was furious, so he accused me of cheating and left right then and there. He told everyone on both sides of the family what happened, made posts on social media, and wanted a divorce. His family and a lot of our friends all called to say how upset they were at me and called me really nasty names. My mother was by my side the entire time and I kept professing my innocence. Jim refused to pick me up from the hospital, threw my stuff out on the lawn and changed the locks, so I had to stay with my parents. When my sister called to ask for the baby stuff, Jim texted me pictures of the bare nursery room and said he got rid of everything. He even destroyed my art studio and the art I made. He even told me my work would be too awful to sell. I was distraught and tried to focus on my baby. Weeks went by and Jim refused to speak to me directly. He has never once asked about our child. Eventually he agreed to do a paternity test and he was 100% the father. No one could believe the results, so it was done again. Jim's the dad. Around that same time, one of Jim's cousins did the ancestry thing and there was around 30% of African ancestry in the family. This combined with the test, Jim's paternal great-grandmother admitted to having an affair around the time Jim's grandfather was born, and because he could pass she just assumed her husband was the father. Since then, Jim has been reaching out and everyone has come to apologize. While it did feel good to feel vindicated, the damage has been done. I can't unhear or unsee all the horrible things that were said and done. Not just to me but to my child as well. Jim made some very racist remarks, things that I thought he'd never say, and he did it so easily. Regardless of what our daughter looks like, I don't want her to be around that. What else will Jim and his family say or do the next time they get mad? How are they going to treat our daughter when she does something that upsets them? Jim has been begging for forgiveness. I said I needed time. He asked to see the baby and I let him, but I'm too afraid to physically hand her to him. He's repairing the nursery and keeps asking me what I would like. I cry every time, saying we already had what I liked and some of the items that we have can't be replaced. He asked me if I still loved him and I admitted that he showed me his worst self, so I don't know if I could live with that image. I didn't mean to be hurtful, but it's how I feel. My sister suggested couples therapy, but I don't feel like I should have to work to fix something that I didn't break. I've never cheated and have been 100% innocent in all of this. Am I wrong for not wanting to give Jim a second chance? Update: one of the reasons Jim wouldn't pick me up from the hospital was because I wouldn't admit to cheating or give him any details, because there weren't any, which made him angrier. Based on the pictures Jim sent me, he didn't take a sledgehammer to the crib or anything. He just took stuff down to either return it for the money or gave it away. While deeply hurtful, I wouldn't call it violent, but maybe it is. Online he announced that I pushed out a dark-skinned baby and he was going to divorce me. His family started with the racial comments and eventually he started doing it too, but only through my family. He refused to speak to me directly. Once the truth came out, everything he and his family posted were taken down, but I, and a few friends, still have the screenshots. Jim never wrote down his racial remarks. While he didn't say any of the racist words, he did make comments about our daughter being a welfare princess, and how I was going to be just another baby mama. Just to clarify, Jim is white and I am at least half white. One of my parents is adopted, and with everything that's happened, they decided to do the ancestry thing too. My parents had at least 45% American ancestry, which means I have at least 20%. I am legally separated from my husband with primary custody, and I'm living with my parents until further notice. He still keeps apologizing and wants me to come back to the house. He even offered to leave so I could stay with our daughter, but I don't want to and really like having the support of my parents. My dad is retired, so he does a lot of the babysitting while my mother and I work remotely. I do go to the house every so often so Jim can see his daughter and for couples counseling via telecom. In one of the sessions, Jim confessed something really hurtful. He cheated. It was while we were dating, before he proposed, and his treatment towards me was a projection. It was with an ex-girlfriend who had cheated on him and he hooked up with her as an ego boost. He started to feel guilty but was too scared that I would walk away to ever confess. Jim also admitted that he was scared when I got pregnant since our baby wasn't planned. He was very anxious about being a father, but just pretended to be excited because he didn't want to look like an a-hole. My husband was so willing to believe that our daughter wasn't his because he thought he had an out. Now that he knows that our child is his and has spent time with her, Jim regrets everything and just wants his family back. He is willing to spend the rest of his life making it up to us. This was all deeply hurtful and I've cried about it more than once. Jim has been lying to me and my ability to trust him hasn't improved at all. When the holidays came around, Jim's parents asked about seeing their grandchild and I didn't want to. They told me that it was selfish of me to keep her away and I reminded them of their past. They said that they've already apologized and tried to minimize the situation. They said that I can't be angry forever and that I need to learn to forgive them. I'm so ashamed of ever loving and marrying into this family. I've decided to contact a lawyer and will be filing for divorce after my daughter's first birthday.
Do not fuck with Bobby, he will cost us a fortune. My friend Bobby was a CNC machinist, a good one, and the only one in the company. The company he worked for made an intricate product, and his CNC part was crucial. The rest of the product is bolted onto it. The finished product sold for tens of thousands of dollars. It took 3 hours to make this piece. Bobby would make 3 a day. He'd make 1 in the morning, take his coffee break, then make another, and take his lunch break. He'd stay late to make the third part, and make 2 hours overtime. His new foreman turned out to be a huge jerk. He'd try to get Bobby to do other tasks, and Bobby said no, as he needed to monitor the CNC machine during all stages of the cycle. Foreman bitched to the plant manager, who told him to back off and leave Bobby alone. One day there was a bad snowstorm, and Bobby was 10 minutes late. The foreman was there to greet him at the time clock, with a shit-eating grin on his face, holding a demerit slip. Bobby had clocked in a minute late the previous week, and the union rules said that if you were late twice within 14 days, you got 20 demerit points. Bobby and foreman got into a bit of an animated conversation, and the union steward came over and said that Bobby had no choice but to take the demerit hit. So Bobby went to work. His shift was 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., but he usually stayed until 6:30 to finish the last part. Not today. At 4:30, he shut the machine down and headed for the door. The next morning, foreman comes over and says that the assembly team is short a part. Yeah, I know. I'm working on it right now. It'll be done in 2 hours. But they need 3 a day. Why didn't you make 3 of them yesterday? Because my shift is over at 4:30, and I went home. What? You stay every night until the third part is finished. Bobby pulled the demerit slip out of his shirt pocket, looked foreman in the eye, and said, not anymore. So now every week, instead of getting 15 parts, they were getting 10. Foreman tried to sweep it under the rug, but within a few days, chaos ensued. The assemblers had no core part, and their team went to the plant manager to let him know that production was falling. The assemblers liked it, they got to hang around yakking while they waited for the next CNC part to arrive. Eventually, there was a meeting with plant manager, foreman, union steward, and Bobby. Foreman tried to throw Bobby under the bus, saying that he refused overtime. Union steward pointed out that, as per the contract, mandatory overtime was only in case of emergencies, and this wasn't an emergency. Bobby had every right to decline the overtime. Foreman lost his temper, started yelling at Bobby and union steward, and was asked to leave the meeting. The plant manager knew he was screwed, and looked at Bobby and asked, what's it going to take to get you to work the overtime? Bobby smiled, and replied, as long as Foreman is my supervisor, I won't be working a minute of overtime. And that was the last anyone saw Foreman. They hired a new foreman, who was explicitly instructed, do not, under any circumstances, fuck with Bobby. Redditors who work in retail, what's the saddest thing someone ever returned? I work in customer relations for a luxury car dealership. I get basically paid to interact with customers and make them feel more at ease during the buying and servicing of their vehicle. That being said, I get to know and like a lot of our customers. So one day last year around Halloween we had a young family come in looking for an SUV since the wife was pregnant and the husband had just gotten a huge promotion. They had a kid already that was around 4 if I remember correctly and were just actually cool jerk people. I actually spent a lot of time getting to know them through their buying process and was excited to have this family get their dream car. Fast forward to this August and I see their SUV out in the parking lot. When you work at a dealership you learn your favorites plates and cars. Or I'm a effing freak, both are possible. I ask around and no one is service is working with them. So I ask our sales manager thinking they're switching into the redesigned model of the SUV. We talked about it when they bought their car. He gave me an uneasy look and said it was the wife's mom and I should talk to the sales guy. Weird, but okay. I find the sales guy and he's also uneasy but after a few minutes tells me to go to the back office and he'll fill me in. Apparently the husband lost his shit and ended up shooting himself and his wife a few months prior. She had just had the baby and I suppose that stressed him out. Her mom was called when the toddler went to a neighbor and said his parents were messy and still sleeping. Loud neighbors get a taste of their own medicine. I moved out on my own for the first time in 2013 and moved into an old house converted into a 2-floor apartment, directly across from my future in-laws. The downstairs neighbors were loud. They were blaring music at all hours and wouldn't cut the grass or take out the trash on our shared schedule. They were crappy neighbors, but never bothered me directly. The guy was pretty chill when sober and would turn the music down a little when I texted him. He was okay until his girlfriend moved in. Now add shouting matches to the mix, and all of a sudden my request to turn down the music makes him turn it up. I can barely walk on my super thin floor without her banging on the ceiling with a broom. I was okay since I am a heavy sleeper and could sleep through anything. Once my wife moved in, I quickly found out that she is quite the opposite. I told her that we can't expect them to remain silent when she's ready for bed and we had to be reasonable, but the wall rattling music needs to stop during the night. She hated it during the day, but I told her there's nothing we can do then, so she would go to her parents' house a lot during the day. I talked to neighbor guy. He said yeah man that's cool but it turns out the girlfriend wasn't having it and his attitude then changed to yeah well it's our house so you can go F yourself if you think you can tell us what to do and you can move out if you don't like it. Something definitely had to change once my wife was pregnant, and then the baby came. So I did the only thing I could do. I fought fire with fire, and complied with the law to the T. I could only report them for noise after 11 o'clock. I now forget the morning hour when the noise could start, but I believe it was 9 o'clock. My dad has these huge old concert speakers in his garage. Professional grade, black leather bound, 5 feet tall and 3 feet wide, and a pretty nice vintage stereo. He has 2, but my apartment was so small I sadly only had room for 1. We replaced our coffee table with this thing and laid it face down onto our thin, office carpet. Tired of his crap tunes, I tested this Geneva Convention breaking device when they weren't home. Holy cow. I had to take everything down from tables, counters and shelves because they would shake off. I prepared audio files to feed the stereo. I was giddy like a kid with a new Christmas toy. I turned it on when I left for work and got my wife up to send her to her parents. I came home from work and hung out at her parents until it was close to bedtime. They resisted for 3 days. On day 2, I found a pile of manure on my doorstep, but it didn't faze me. I cycled between sine waves and clashing chords, marching music, clips of preachers and the most stupid songs you could think of. This poor old house rattled in ways I didn't think possible. The vibrations from the sine wave would make your vision blur. I eventually got a text from him that reads sorry man you can stop now. I did not. He needed a few more days to let it sink in. Plus I had so much fun putting it together. They complained to the police and the landlord. There was nothing they could do since I wasn't doing anything wrong. I didn't even hear music during the time of peace to follow. It was so quiet. They would build up their courage and try to play music every few weeks when I wasn't home, but my wife was. I then showed her how to use the machine so she could let it loose while I was away. I had to give them a spanking every now and then, but they learned. They were so happy when we moved out. How drastic have you seen someone change after a heartbreak? When I say this man did the biggest flip of all time, I mean it. He was a role model student in high school when we dated, straight A student, stayed away from all substances and was very successful in sports. I was a regular girl in high school who studied hard but one day when we shared a gym class we had a weird connection between us. We went on to date and I overlooked his weird obsession with stuffed animals and how he fantasizes about white painted toenails. At first it was all amazing. I let him do anything he wanted, draw on me during intimacy, even play with my belly button. That is besides the point however. We broke up due to the fact that he had started sleeping with a different woman. To make matters worse, this woman was 38 years of age. 18 years older than him at the time. He had also started secretly using substances towards the end of our relationship. The final straw came when he showed up to my birthday party with the woman he was sleeping with. I had no choice but to break up with him. And if I had known what was going to happen I would have stayed with him. To sum up a very, very long story. He got disowned by his parents due to the fact he was kicked out of college for dealing hardcore substances on campus. Went to jail for dealing to minors, got bailed out. Dealed to minors again. Did 5 years. Once he got out he turned his eye to his parents. One night he got very intoxicated and thought it would be a funny prank to take his mother's life. He followed through with this plan and took his mother's life in her sleep. I managed to get in contact with him as I was curious as to why he has turned into this monster. When I did, he explained to me that the reason he took his mother's life is he was watching a show in which the main character had the power to bring people back to life. Besides this, he broke down crying and told me that everything that went wrong in his life was my fault and guilt tripped me into everything. I came home to my girlfriend and sobbed. He is now in prison as he deserves.
What is not a bullet you dodged, but a huge tactical nuke you dodged? In college me and my 2 best friends were drinking, playing Mario Kart and just shooting the shit. We were hungry and wanted food. I said let's just make a tombstone pizza because we've been drinking and most delivery services were closed at 1:30 a.m. One said he's fine to drive, I said no bad idea. He got the other guy to go with. McDonald's usually doesn't take 2 hours to get, so eventually I went for a scooter ride since McDonald's was less than 2 miles away. I noticed there's a taped off spot on the bridge right before McDonald's with a crane, cops and an ambulance. They curbed the car and drove it off the bridge and into the shallow creek top first and died on impact. I dodged the nuke of death but ate the bullet of survivor's guilt for nearly 5.
Teachers, what is the most disturbing thing your student has ever done? I had a student who was running a substance ring out of his locker, complete with 5 employees and secret codes and stuff. The student who had a combination of autism, ADHD, and oppositional defiance disorder, which meant that he came into my classroom and started swearing at me and the other students was pretending he wasn't there. That same student was given some tape to tape his own mouth shut if he wanted to. He made the tape into a sword and began poking the other students with it. That accommodation was taken away. The student who had been exposed to so much head trauma from his mother and stepfather that I guess it turned him into a sociopath somehow? If you did not talk to him in exactly the right way, and sometimes if you did, he would have a complete meltdown where he would actively threaten physical harm to you. The student who was one of the lieutenants in the aforementioned substance ring who was incredibly smart and the only student I've ever had who I was convinced would commit a crime someday. I have had multiple students go to jail after they left my classroom, 2 for killing someone, several others for assault. This kid scared me more than them. Something about the look behind his eyes, he knew exactly the right things to say and do, but you could tell the moment he was making the choice to do the exact opposite just to see what would happen, like a cat knocking something off a high shelf just to watch it shatter. The long-term sub in the science classroom came to the teacher's lounge and looked shaken. When I asked him what happened, he told me that the same kid was sitting at the back of the class, had whipped out his PP and rubbed one out during the lesson. He unloaded into the hair of the girl sitting in front of him and yelled profanities at her, saying that is what she deserved. My wife stole our daughter's college money to fund her shopping addiction and wants me to take the blame. I'm stuck in between a rock and a hard place and I don't know what to do, and the problem is, I can't discuss this with anyone I'm close with for privacy reasons. I've been with my wife Andrea, 48 female, and my stepdaughter Cassie, 17 female, for 8 years now. I love them both to death, but Cassie is a very brilliant young woman. Recognizing her potential, me and Andrea decided to put together a college fund for Cassie so she wouldn't be crushed by debt. Over the years, it has amounted to over $200,000. Cassie is aware of this and is banking on it since she's trying to get into the Ivy League. To make a long story short, last week, I found out that almost $170,000 of the money was missing from the account. I freaked the F out and asked Andrea if she knew anything about it. She teared up and said that she had been spending the money over the years to fund her spending habit. I was furious, but I had a moment of clarity. I browsed these subs enough to know that an affair was possible, so I asked her if she was having one. She adamantly denied it and offered any proof I needed. Social media accounts, emails, her work phone, everything. She offered to show me the receipts as well. There was nothing that popped out as suspicious, and the math from the receipts added up as well, so I let it go. But we still had the major problem of the money being gone. She described herself as a shopping addict, and the money from Cassie's account was just too tempting not to use. She didn't make excuses, but offered no solutions. As stated before, I was beyond furious. She ruined Cassie's chances at going to college debt-free and has changed the trajectory of her whole life. I had asked her to stay with her sister while I tried to figure this out. Cassie was concerned about why she was leaving, but we just said we needed a little bit of space. I asked Andrea to come back home yesterday and we had an extremely long discussion about how to handle this. She stopped me from talking and asked a favor of me. She asked if I could take the fall for her. For context, her and Cassie don't get along for a variety of reasons, and knowing how independent Cassie is, she will probably leave right after college if not during. In fact, me and Cassie get along very well and she comes to me for a lot of her issues. Andrea fears this will permanently drive Cassie away and she doesn't want to lose her. I told her that before we even talk about that, she needed to acknowledge her mistake and own it. She needed to go to individual therapy. We needed couples counseling. She needed to find a shopaholic support group and that I would be controlling the finances from now on. She said those terms were steep but fair. I said she needed to tell Cassie what she did, apologize and hope for the best. She refused and said she could never lose Cassie. She said I could survive the mistake, but she couldn't. I told her that in order to even consider me taking the fall, she needs to agree to my terms. I don't know what the heck to do. The last thing I want to do is lie to Cassie, but I don't want Andrea and Cassie to split up forever, and the worst part about this whole thing is that Cassie's life is ruined either way, and I don't know how to replenish the money other than maybe borrowing from my retirement. Reddit, do you have any suggestions? Divorce is always an option, but I love Andrea despite her mistakes, and me dating at age 52 is next to impossible. Update, after everyone in here knocked some sense into me, I realized I can't lie to Cassie. I love her too much and she deserves the absolute truth. No matter how ugly and hard it is, I will be talking to Andrea and telling her that we need to tell her the truth together as a condition of us staying together, or else I will initiate divorce proceedings and tell Cassie anyway. Also, as someone suggested, I don't need her trying to flip the script on me, so I'll record our interactions going forward.
My hypocrite parents are pushing me to forgive my cheating ex. I got livid and asked them if they wanted me to endure the same betrayal my father inflicted on my mother and end up with a terrible life. I was to be married in July. 2 months ago I came home from a work trip to find my ex-fiancé in bed with my BFF's sister. I kicked him out, cancelled the wedding, Warned him I would get rid of his stuff if he didn't come get it all. Then weeks later I dumped everything he gave me in the curbside with a free sign and pawned the ring. I blocked him everywhere, called the cops on him every time he showed up and banged on my door. He also made a scene at my workplace, so I had to call the cops again. His family also called and pleaded his case altogether. I didn't go overly harsh on my ex-BFF's sister. I did tell her husband I caught her in bed with my ex. Last I heard she'd been kicked out of the house and was back living with her parents. Ex-BFF tried to talk to me into giving them both a chance to explain, then got angry at me for ruining her sister's relationship, and called me petty and cold-hearted. So I kicked her to the curb too. I don't want dishonest people who are blasé about betrayal in my life. This encounter no doubt simmered under my skin until I unleashed on my parents. Maybe that's the reason, because it lingered. I was so harsh with them. Last week, I met my parents for dinner and brought a date, hoping his presence would prevent any discussion about my failed engagement. But no. Even the presence of my date didn't stop them from bringing it all up again. They said he was incredibly sorry, insisting that I owe it to him to at least talk. Just 5 minutes to explain himself. She meant nothing to him and he made a mistake. They called me cruel for shutting him out like this. How could I call the police on him? How could I treat his family the same way? His parents, they argued, were good people who didn't deserve that humiliation. He's going through a rough time, they said. He's depressed, and everyone is worried about him. He really loves me, they've assured me. He's learned his lesson, and they claim it's time for me to grow up and forgive him. I lost my cool. Asked my father if he expected me to give my ex a pass. Every time he sticks his DCK into anything that moves, like he does, I asked my mother how turning a blind eye to her husband's infidelity works for her. How does she hold her head up while having lunch with women who have slept around with her husband for years? Is that the kind of man, the life she wants for me and my sister? For her daughters? I asked if they had any idea of the impact that knowledge had on me and my siblings growing up. Knowing that dad was late home from work because he was SCR-ing his secretary. Knowing work weekend was code for a dirty weekend with a woman, not our mother. Did they not know why it was that of their 4 children? I'm the only one that still talks to them. Do they not question why they were not invited to my brother's weddings? Why they have never met either of my brother's wives and children? Do they think my sister's silence is because she's being dramatic and throwing a tantrum? Really? I stood from the table, congratulated them on the loss of their last remaining child, and told them I hoped their arrogance, willful blindness, and misery would comfort them to their last breaths. Then I left. My date, I should have saved him for a proper date rather than a F you to my parents, took me to the nearest bar, let me cry on his shoulder while I proceeded to get SHT-faced, then made sure I got home safely. The next day he messaged me to see if I was alive and sent a double cheeseburger, large fries, and a large Sprite over with DoorDash. I didn't block my parents, but I haven't heard from them. It's been a week and I've calmed down enough to feel regret. Not for what I said, but because I could see the looks on their faces when I made my final farewell. I crushed them, and hurt them, especially my mother. Despite their faults, and there are many, I love my parents. I don't like knowing I hurt them. I'm feeling a lot of guilt about it.
Today I messed up sharing my sandwich with a stray dog and now I have a dog. A few days ago, it was early in the evening and I was sitting outside my tent when a dog came up to me. He stood in front of me while wagging his tail. I tried to see if someone was coming behind him, but he was alone. He looked a bit dirty and a little skinny, so it gave me the idea that he was a stray. I am always wary of stray animals, but he looked so sweet and friendly. I felt sad for him because I imagined that he probably lost his way home one day and had to fend for himself. I shared my sandwich and water with him. Afterwards, we awkwardly pretended to not be looking at each other for a while until he eventually sat down close to me. We sat in silence and I was secretly excited, but I didn't want to startle him. I have never had a dog before, so I didn't want to offend him or scare him off if he wasn't ready to leave yet. I had to admit that I was enjoying the company. I had to eventually drag myself inside the tent to get some sleep because I had worked the following day. I felt bad leaving him because for the first time in a long time, I felt not so alone. Anyway, I figured that he would go on his way. In the morning, to my surprise, he was still there. I was more surprised by how happy I was to see him because I've always thought that I wasn't a dog person. Not because I don't like dogs, but because I had never really gotten to know one. After I cleaned up, we ate breakfast, then I packed everything into my backpack and made the walk to work. The dog followed me the whole way there. I was conflicted. I was hoping he didn't go on his way, but I had no idea what I was going to do with a dog that I had just met when I got to work. Luckily my boss allowed me to leave him at the back with some water only if he didn't incessantly bark. Fortunately he behaved, and after work, we walked back home. He was so comfortable walking next to me, wagging his tail and running around me, like we had been friends for a while. It was a pretty good feeling. I got him a small bag of dog food and a leash, but I haven't used the leash on him yet. I don't want him to feel trapped because it hasn't been that long, although he lets me pet him and give him belly rubs. He has been with me since and he makes me happy, but I have this fear that someone will stop me one day and say, "Hey, that's my dog." Until then he is my dog, hopefully forever. Today I effed up by spilling coffee on an autistic boy. So, let me get one thing straight first. Spilling the tiniest amount of not particularly hot coffee on this boy is only the tip of the iceberg, and nobody got hurt from this. Physically anyway, my self-worth is hurting. This was a good 2 years ago. I'm new to Reddit, but my self-worth is still hurting thinking about it. I had 4 hours of public transport ahead of me, but I was ready for this. I'd created a 2-hour music playlist, and the other 2 hours was committed to finishing a book that I never got time to read. I settled in for the first leg of the journey, and put my headphones in. I pressed play. Things were great for the first few stops, but as time went on, the train began filling up, and the once empty seat around the table I had settled at became a family picnic area and playground for 3 passengers who took the seats at the table I was at. It's worth mentioning at this point that I had a window seat, so basically I was stuck when things went terribly wrong. So, the young boy, his older teenage sister, who was using an iPad, and his mother beside me, who was reading what seemed to be a recently bought book from a station's W.H. Smith's, settled down for the journey. And the young boy quietly played with his toys and sipped his Ribena and ate his banana sandwich, all while I happily listened to music with my earphones in at half volume. Everything was fine, until that is, the track changed, and an MP3 began playing that I totally did not mean to put on my playlist. My best friend's voice, screaming at the top of his possibly drunken lungs "Wake Me Up Inside" by Evanescence, began blaring in my unsuspecting ears. Imagine a full-grown man, literally screaming the lyrics, with no backing track, as loud as humanly possible, and I still think people would struggle to fully appreciate how devastating this was to my poor eardrums. It was loud, and in my shock and pain, I wrenched the earphones out of my poor ears as fast as I could, being that I could not get to the phone in my pocket fast enough to not cause possible deafness. But in doing so, the earphone swung right into the face of the mother passenger to my right, causing her to lurch forward, spilling some of her cup of coffee onto the table. And the coffee went on her brand new book, her scarf, her daughter's iPad, her son's toys, sandwich, carton of juice, and his hand. Now, this is where it's important to remember that the coffee was not hot, it did not burn the child, and the child did not complain or show any shock to this having happened. He didn't even notice the splash of coffee until his mother started yelling. And boy, did she yell, "What have you done? There's coffee all over this table. It's on my boy. You've burned my boy." Immediately awkward and apologetic, I scrambled to my feet to help clear up, not remembering the luggage rack directly above my head. Down I went, hands on the table, knocking the cup completely over, as I hastily stammered apology after apology. I was a mess. Well, she was screaming. People stood up in their seats to watch the carnage unfold at our once peaceful table. The teenage girl was crying about her iPad, immediately stopping by the way, when she realized she just hit the side button and it had gone to sleep. The mother was screaming about the coffee on the table, the now spilt Ribena that her son had dropped, the struggles of being a mother with an autistic son, the wet pages of her book, and the bright red, incredibly embarrassed mess of a 20-year-old stood and stooped next to her, attempting to soak up a whole cup of coffee with a single-use tissue. And then, the boy began wailing. He started pushing everything off the table, and, it wasn't really crying with tears, it was just frustrated noise. I felt like an absolute monster. Needless to say, I got the hell out of Dodge. When the woman stepped into the aisle to reach up for her bag, getting out baby wipes and tissues, I stepped out clumsily, apologizing continuously, and making for the train door to the next carriage. With coffee down my front, a bump on my head and a lobster-red face, I stepped into the next carriage, then made for the next, and the next, until I was at the other end of the train. And in the eerie silence that compared to the chaos I had just left, I sat and considered how I never seemed to be able to have an uneventful train journey. Literally, every time something goes wrong, and this time, I sort of spilled lukewarm coffee on an autistic boy.
What's your McDonald's horror story? My daughter, who was 17 at the time, was working at a McDonald's in a bad neighborhood. They had to constantly check the bathrooms for needles and passed out junkies. She actually found a nice Bowie knife in it one day and the manager let her keep it. So one day she steps outside for a break and finds a man lying on the sidewalk, bleeding from a stab wound, not from a Bowie knife, so she does what they were taught to do and calls for a manager, grabs some gloves and a towel and comes back outside. The manager, 30-something male, is standing outside, wringing his hands, along with several older staff members, and none of them will take the gloves. The manager is trained in first aid as part of his job, but he won't calm down. So my daughter tells one of them to go back inside and call 911, and she puts on the gloves, takes the towels and applies pressure to the wound. She talks to the guy while they wait for the ambulance and keeps him calm, while her manager is trying not to pass out from hyperventilating. When the ambulance arrives, the paramedics assess the man, and while one is getting the guy's wound stabilized, the other one starts asking questions. When he finds out my daughter is only 17, he lost his crap on the manager and then commended my daughter for doing such a good job. He told her that she should be a paramedic because she was so cool under pressure. She laughed and told him she hates the sight of blood, but didn't want the guy to die. She then went on break and had a little cry, then returned to work.
I embarrassed my own mom because she simply does not know me. Truly, I want to know who the "ah" is here, so if it's me, please let me know. My mom and I have a long, complex history, which can basically be summed up by saying that I had a fabulous childhood, but as a teenager became neglected, and have felt that way ever since. There's a lot of trauma there, although she's not willing to talk to me about it. On the other hand, my mom's a great person. I know that she does have love for me, and we talk every day. Well, I call her every day. She has actually never called me in years unless she needed something from me or was returning a call. However, she has mistreated me for over a decade in some significant, trauma-inducing though not abusive ways. My mom and I actually have the same employer, a large university, but almost never cross paths in the workplace. I've had my job for a year and a half. My mom's been in her position for 2.5 years. My mom loves her job. She works as a secretary for a political department. I also love my job. I work with at-risk youth and find some purpose in the work I do. So here's what happened. Our university sponsored a conference for their employees who identify as working mothers. My mom and I planned to attend and meet up starting at the conference's luncheon. She beat me there by quite a bit as my workshop went over, and by the time I got there the table was full except the seat my mom had saved for me. And a lot of the people at our table were some big people, the head of payroll, the wife of the VP, etc. I sat down at the table with my lunch and my mom began introducing everyone at the table to me. She's much more involved with other campus employees than I am. She went one by one and told me their names and what they do, etc. After introducing everyone, she started introducing me to the table. The following conversation ensued. Mom, this is my daughter, she works Gear Up. Me, with some surprise in my voice, no I don't, I work for Trio. My mom, oh. My daughter works for Trio. She's a recruiter. Me, no mom, I'm an academic advisor. My mom, oh. You're an academic advisor? What do you do then? Me, I build one-on-one relationships with youth in the local schools who have academic talent yet have low-income backgrounds and would be first-generation college students, and help them reach their academic goals now and in the future. My mom, oh, okay. Wait, where is your office again? I then described to her where my office is and the conversation basically ended there. For a little more context, I could tell anyone exactly where my mom's office is, as I've made the effort to visit her there every now and then, and I could tell you all about her coworkers and her boss, give you her job description, and week to week know what projects or events she's working on, when their department is hosting someone important, etc. I know these things because I call her every day and ask her about her day and how she's doing and take a genuine interest in her life. The next day, after I had called my mom and we chatted for a bit, my mom said, hey, I want to talk to you about something that happened the other day and I should probably do it in person but I'll just do it now. In my head I feel excited thinking she was actually about to acknowledge how hurtful and shocking it was that she knew nothing about my work life. When she says you embarrassed me yesterday, she goes on to rehash that conversation, claiming that I embarrassed her in front of important colleagues she respects by correcting her in front of them, and how after that the conversation at the table mostly stopped. After apologizing to my mom immediately after she expressed her thoughts, but letting her know that I felt that her not knowing anything about what I do is perhaps the greater of the two wrongs, it took me practically begging her to apologize before she quite hurriedly said she was sorry and quickly changed topics. And before apologizing she attempted to make several excuses, such as well, you don't offer up as many details about your life. The truth is she just never asks. This entire year, and I was so sick for months while pregnant I was on IV drips and also had my first baby, she has never called me on her own accord and asked how I am doing. Also, anyone who knows me knows that I'm a talker, and I call her every day to talk so yeah, not knowing details about my life is not because I don't share information. I actually have a real problem oversharing. She's still holding this encounter over my head. Reasons I would be the I corrected my mom in front of her colleagues. My tone of voice was definitely hinted with some shock when she introduced my job wrong, and probably my body language throughout the encounter expressed that I was taken aback by the situation and in correcting her I made others uncomfortable. Her take, and well the situation was definitely embarrassing for my mom. I was factual in the way I corrected her and definitely didn't make efforts to save her face, though I definitely didn't react in a way that I thought made me look bad, tone, word choice, emotion, etc., in front of my colleagues. Because of my trauma from her, I might interpret things wrong and therefore might have misinterpreted the situation, and asking her to apologize for not knowing basic things about me was over the top. Reasons she would be the she had no idea what her daughter does every day for work that she loves and has been doing for a long time, despite her daughter knowing fine details about her work life. She didn't even know where her daughter's office was, despite working on the same campus. The embarrassment at the table and resulting lack of conversation was because she didn't know basic things about her daughter. My take, in other words, she embarrassed herself. She lacked the empathy or care to see how that might have hurt her daughter, especially given past trauma she's aware of, to discuss the conversation after the fact from a place of love and affection/apology, and instead blamed me. To get an apology even after expressing how it hurt me I had to ask her to apologize, and she did so only very half-heartedly. She made excuses to try to validate her ignorance and prevent her from needing to apologize. She still blames me for this embarrassing interaction. In all of this she triggered glass child trauma that I've talked to her about before. My stupid lesbian sister harassed my girlfriend. My parents are blaming me for it. Am I the a-hole for leaving the restaurant after my sister flirted with my girlfriend and made her uncomfortable? My 19 sister Haley, 20, is a very open and flirty person. She's never put a label on her sexuality, but she has said she's attracted to everyone. Ever since we were in high school, she'd often flirt with girls I was interested in. She'd also flirt with my friends when they'd come over to hang out. Sometimes Haley would even come into my room without knocking just to talk to them. It was very uncomfortable and some of my friends even stopped coming over to my house because of it. This made me really angry and I told our parents, 45 and 42, but they'd always say I'm being homophobic and to leave her alone. So she'd always get away with it. A few months after she graduated, she moved out of the house and I haven't had to deal with her flirting with my friends anymore. 7 months ago I met my now girlfriend Layla, 18, and we really hit it off. We've been together a little over 4 months. One thing to note about Layla is that she's really shy, so she's never voices any concerns until after the fact. Well, I really wanted her to meet my parents, so we set up a quick dinner at a nice restaurant on Tuesday night. Without even telling me, my parents invited Haley, who was almost 30 minutes late. For the better part of the dinner, she would constantly flirt with my girlfriend. She'd give Layla compliments about her clothing, body, facial features, and even offer her number multiple times. My parents would just laugh along with her antics, saying it's just how she normally is. But I could clearly see Layla was uncomfortable, so I paid my side of the bill and took her home. When we got to her house, I asked if I could spend the night and she said yes. And that's where I've been for the past few days. My parents and Haley have been blowing up my phone calling me all sorts of names. Which has me thinking I was in the wrong. I haven't answered any of my sister's messages, but I told my mom where I am. When I asked Layla about it, she said the compliments were nice at first, but she got uncomfortable. I didn't put my reasoning, sorry. My parents think I'm an asshole for ignoring my sister's messages, and an even bigger jerk for walking out of the restaurant. They say I was entitled and rude. Does this make me TA?
When I was about 12 years old, my brother and I were sleeping downstairs because we stayed up quite late watching TV the night prior. I woke up in the middle of the night with a feeling that something wasn't right. I sat up, looked around, and saw what looked like a very thin and pale person with long black hair, laying down on the kitchen table, moving their legs in a forwards motion. I quietly asked who's there. After that, the legs stopped moving and they just sat there looking up at the ceiling. I lived on a military base at the time, and next to my house was an old abandoned prison that was no longer in use. There are many people within the small town that have said that the prison is haunted, and there are many sightings of seeing people in the windows of the prison.
I tricked my girlfriend by traumatizing her all night. Am I the jerk for testing my girlfriend? I, 26, and Clara, 23, have been dating for 3 years. I have been cheated on in past relationships, particularly in high school, and have had a tough time getting over it. Anyways, Clara and I have a very incredible relationship. We like most of the same things and support each other in the things we may not agree on all the time. We have an amazing intimate relationship and like the same things in the bedroom. All in all, I couldn't ask for a better girlfriend. However, I guess I was feeling especially insecure one day and felt almost as if it was too good to be true, as in the past my exes also seemed to be so perfect before they tragically fell down in infidelity. While she was at work, I made a fake Instagram account and messaged her using an AI-created face and texts asking her to do explicit things. It took some time, but she responded and denied the offers. I'll admit I got carried away playing the character of a jerk and got a little forceful and aggressive until she blocked me. I was proud of her for not cheating and for remaining loyal and thought nothing about it for the rest of the evening. She came home that night and completely broke down and showed me texts that had awoken her PTSD from some guy on Instagram. I proceeded to pretend as if it wasn't me and comforted her, though she didn't seem to lighten up after that. I got frustrated and we had an argument and she called me a jerk for expecting her to be okay immediately. We slept it off and got over it. Fast forward, a few weeks later, Clara was setting up a party for her sister and asked me to text her and get some details because it wouldn't sound suspicious from me. I didn't understand what she expected, so I allowed her to do it on my behalf, and in doing so, she found the account and the messages and has since left and not returned. She won't return my calls, and has since sent her brothers to come pick up her stuff, but they won't help me either. I have texted her and called her and left messages explaining that she was overreacting and she is more understanding of my situation considering I've been cheated on before and she hasn't. It's really frustrating because it's not like the guy on Instagram actually did anything to her, and she's making it such a big deal. I felt a little bit of remorse, because I miss her and want her back. So, am I the jerk? I brought back memories of their dead son. I was thrown a laptop by an angry executive early this morning, with him complaining that his laptop had locked up again. Normally we have a ticketing system in place for any and all tech issues. However, when an executive wants something, he bypasses the system because of rank privileges. So I go through the normal routine of diagnosis, and through my efforts, I see that the issue is simply bad RAM. I replaced the RAM and took the unit back to the executive. He tells me he refuses to take the unit unless I have made 100% sure that everything that was wrong with it is fixed. Internally I wanted to punch this man, but I held it in and simply asked him what other issues he was having and pulled out a notepad. He ran through a load of issues that just needed a cleaner, so I took his unit back to my desk. After deleting bullshit programs and cleaning out junk data, I found that a folder in his roaming was reading 12 gigabytes but was hidden. I log in with my creds and enable viewing hidden or protected files, and I see that the hidden folder was from 2014. It was just a bunch of pictures and looked to be a temp folder created by a picture manager software I deleted. When we see personal pictures on the machine, we are supposed to delete them immediately. No one ever actually does this, as we are not that big of dicks in the int department. So I decided to just move the pictures to his desktop under a folder I created called Old Pics. I took the laptop to him and informed him of the pictures. He thanked me for my time, and I went back to work. About an hour later, he and his wife, who had come up to join him for lunch, came over to my desk. He seemed very happy, and she was crying. Normally when I have nothing to do and a boss comes over, I stand up to greet them. Just the way I was raised, I guess. I was not prepared for what followed and was totally shocked by the outcome. The lady wanted to thank me for finding the pictures, and the executive reached out to shake my hand, thanking me profusely before pulling me into a hug in front of the entire department. I awkwardly hugged him back, and he let me go, embarrassed. My eyes are wide, flabbergasted, and totally unprepared for this extremely out of character moment from this guy. Barely able to hold back the tears. His wife tells me that the pictures I recovered were thought to be lost. In 2012 their 4-year-old son died of leukemia, and the pictures I recovered were taken right before his diagnosis when he was 3. Because of a house fire a few years ago, they thought they had lost every last photo of their son. Apparently, those were the photos I had recovered. Today was actually his son's death anniversary, hence why the executive was in a terrible mood. His wife reached out to hug me, and everyone in the IT department stared at their screens hard with puffy eyes, as we were all not expecting this kind of emotional event today. My boss came out of his office to thank me personally and forwarded an email chain to me ahead of a company-wide email that the CEO sent out, basically retelling the tale while naming me personally. He threw in words about striving for excellence and the unexpected results of everyday excellence. My boss told me to take the day off early since the flood of messages was making it hard to do my job.
Have you ever had a bad gut feeling about somebody and it was right? My parents had a small home business, and one day a woman named Sylvia came by holding an infant looking for my parents. I told her they weren't home, but she was welcome to wait as they had mentioned she would be by. I had a very bad feeling about her. She sat and began to talk, and she spoke quite well, but I noticed she contradicted herself. She was wearing an engagement ring, but not a wedding band, for example, but she went back and forth between calling her partner Seth, her husband, boyfriend and fiancé. She told me the infant was her soon-to-be daughter. She and her partner were adopting her through private adoption. She seemed to me very slick while pretending to be very down-to-earth. I couldn't wait for my parents to return when they finished with their business. I told my parents in clear terms not to get involved with her personally or professionally. They expressed great shock and dismay and said she was a wonderful person. It seemed she popped up whenever I was visiting my parents. When the little girl was walking, Sylvia chased her around saying, "Seth and I don't believe in hitting children," and kept putting her in timeout for every little thing. Then when my mother had her back turned and Sylvia didn't know I was behind her, Sylvia slapped her on the leg hard. The baby didn't cry, which made me think she was used to being hit. I graduated and got a job in an apartment. Years went by. This woman adopted a second time with her husband. One infant, one preschooler. She made the state's largest paper for a civic award. She seemed golden, and my parents saw her often as a friend and business associate. They told me I had been wrong about her. Years later, I had forgotten all about her when it was on the news that someone had hired an underage boy to do some illegal work on their property. The boy was severely injured, and when the ambulance arrived with police in tow, they found 3 other children in severe neglect. Who were the parents? Seth and Sylvia. Later it came out from the children that they were being used, as in one of the children's words, forced labor, not allowed to have friends over, and being homeschooled, where they did nothing but chores in and outside of the house all day. They prepared all the meals and served them to the parents and only ate the leftovers. They had to care for all the animals, which were significant in number. They did all the housework, yard work, washed and cleaned the cars. Anything you can think of, they did and were beaten if they didn't comply. They both wound up doing time for endangerment of minors, assault, and child abuse. Later, the 3 adopted children filed a civil suit against the parents and won.
Have you ever picked up a creepy hitchhiker? I was driving home from working at a water park. That whole day we were experiencing a pretty bad snowstorm which made the roads really slick. I was 3/4 of the way home from my short shift when I saw that someone had gone off the road. Their car was really far down into a ditch. I pulled into a driveway to turn around, then put on my flashers, rolled up my window, and got out and tried telling the person to stop hitting the gas because the car was so stuck that it wasn't going to move. It almost looked like the Titanic sinking. The rear end was sitting up higher than the front and the wheels were barely touching the ground. The front wheels kept just slinging mud and snow everywhere. I was yelling but the driver clearly either couldn't hear me or wasn't understanding me, so I climbed down into the ditch to get closer so I could hear them. When I got down I realized that the ditch was full of muddy water, so my boots and pants got soaked. I reached into the car and shut the car off. As soon as I did that I could hear the driver. The driver was a beautiful teenage girl who was clearly extremely drunk. She smelled like alcohol and her words were slurred. She kept talking a mile a minute about how I needed to go get chains so I could pull her car out so she could get home so she could go to work tomorrow. I just interrupted her and asked if she was hurt. She said no and then went back to talking about chains. I told her that I didn't have chains and that even if I did there's no way my tiny truck could pull her car out. The ditch was probably 8 feet deep and her car was at least a foot deep in mud. She would have needed a tractor to get it out, and then once it's out the car looked totaled. I asked her if she had a phone and she said yes and held up a phone with a cracked screen which was soaking wet and not working. I told her that she could use my phone to call someone if we head back to my truck. The door to her car was stuck shut because it was partially buried in mud, so I had to help her crawl out of the window. Then she just crawled up the side of the ditch. I climbed up out of the ditch after her to find her sitting in my truck. I got in as well. She was sitting on top of all of my stuff including my headphones, which was kind of irritating, but she was drunk so she probably didn't even realize. As mentioned, this girl was really pretty. The kind of girl I'd never be able to talk to if not for an emergency situation happening. I gave her my phone to call someone and she tried a few times but no one answered. She said, "Can you just bring me home?" And the way she said it made my face red and I blushed. So I just immediately said yes without considering what I was getting into. My mother was expecting me home at a certain time and because of the weather she was very strict about me updating her. But this girl had me completely distracted. I completely forgot to tell my mom that I had stopped. I asked the girl where she lived and she said next to some Family Dollar in a town 30 minutes away. I knew where that was so I headed in that direction. Things were really quiet and awkward for a few minutes because I was too flustered to say anything. I'm awful at talking to women. She looked younger than me though, so I could have. Then she just started talking about how she had just come from a party and how she was fine to drive, and then about her work and things her friends had said. She kept talking like I knew her for a long time. Making a bunch of references to people I don't know or events I wasn't there for. It was awkward. After a while she kept asking me rapid-fire questions. What's my name? How old am I? What do I do for work? Who I'm friends with? She asked if she could play something on my phone. So she played some music on my phone through the truck speakers. Then I almost went off the road and unalived us both when I tried to peer at the low-cut top for too long. She had said that her hands were freezing and I said yeah, mine are cold too. But she grabbed my hand and felt it and said they're not that cold, haha, and put my hand on her lap. To this day that's the only time I've ever touched a girl like that, and it scared the crap out of me and distracted me so much that we almost went off the road. She was wearing leggings and she put my hand right on her thigh and then her hands on top of mine. I guess to warm it up. It was really hard to drive while also trying to savor the moment, plus she just kept talking and talking. We eventually got to the Family Dollar she had talked about and she just got out of my truck, said, "Thanks," and then walked off towards her house. I thought about asking for her number, but not only did I completely chicken out, but she was older than me and definitely wouldn't be interested. On my way back home I kept thinking about what had happened and how no one was going to believe me, but mostly about how soft and warm she was and how even though I thought she was annoying at first, her voice became angelic after she put my hand on her lap. But then I got pulled over. The cop came up to me and asked if my name was my name. Then he basically started yelling at me saying that my mother has been calling them over and over again, making them go out in this snowstorm looking for me, and that she thought I had crashed. He said that they were already extremely busy because there were people actually going off the road and that I was taking them away from real emergencies. He escorted me the rest of the way home and I had to explain to him and my mother what took me so long. My mother didn't believe me and still doesn't believe me, and I got in a huge amount of trouble and ended up having to quit my job at the water park to get something closer to home. I was grounded for weeks and now I have to have Life 360 on my phone. I think my wife is cheating on me. So to be totally honest, it started with our SX life. We used to have SX about twice a week, but for the past 6 months we do it twice a month at most, and I'm the one that's been instigating it. I didn't think much of it because she was fired from her job 8 months ago and has been staying home since. So I thought maybe she's just depressed or just not in the mood. But a month ago my coworker called me and asked why I didn't tell him I bought an M3. I was confused and he explained he saw a green M3 parked in our drive. I asked my wife about it and she said it was her sister. So I completely forgot about it. But on Friday I called my wife on my lunch break and she was out of breath, like she was in the middle of working out, and that's what she told me. But during the call I heard some kind of slapping noises. I thought maybe she was working out during our call. We have a mini gym at our house so it's not unusual. But in the evening I met up with a buddy of mine for a beer and complained about our SX life. I also told him about that strange call and he said, "Bro, some guy was absolutely raw dogging your wife when you called." And after thinking about it, it makes perfect sense. But I don't know if I'm just paranoid or if there's something to it. I also don't know how to prove it if she is. Which I doubt she is, but I can't get these thoughts out of my head. Before someone suggests a camera, we have one in our drive, but I didn't save it when my coworker called about the M3 so I can't verify who it was. But I checked the recording for when I called her and there wasn't a car parked in our drive, just her car. My mother said my daughter's hair was too wild so I gave her a perm. Now my black ex is pissed off because I supposedly ruined her hair. I think she's just overreacting. I, male 32, have a 4-year-old daughter. Let's call her Gracie. Gracie is half black, her mother, female 31, being African American. Her mother handled all of Gracie's hair care and taught me how to do simple styles, but even those simple styles were difficult. My wife ended up going on a vacation with her friends to celebrate her friend's birthday and my mother came over to visit. I hadn't done Gracie's in a few days so it became nappy and unmanageable. When I tried to comb her hair, the comb broke. My mother said that I should get my daughter a perm so her hair would be more manageable, so I took her to a salon and got it permed. My wife got home and when she saw our daughter she was livid. She screamed at me and then at my mother for even suggesting that, but I think she's overreacting because it's just hair. Then she brought up our wedding. My mother had tried to get my wife to straighten her hair for the wedding, but my wife refused because she wanted her natural hair on her wedding day so she could be as natural as possible. My mother often comments on my wife's and daughter's hair and I agree with my mother. But now my wife's telling me that perms chemically burn and damage hair to change the texture and that I damaged our daughter's hair. Now she's thinking of getting our daughter's hair cut so her hair can heal from the damages, but I still think she's overreacting. Besides, I don't want my daughter's hair to be cut. She looks so cute now. Am I the jerk for straightening my daughter's hair without my wife's permission even though Gracie is my daughter too? Am I wrong for refusing to cook food I dislike? I'm a 17-year-old girl, and I voluntarily take on the responsibility of cooking for my family, which includes my 47-year-old mom, 50-year-old dad, and 14-year-old sister. Although they don't force me to cook, I've noticed that if I don't, we end up eating dinner later than our usual 6 p.m. and relying more on fast food or microwave dinners. To streamline the cooking process, I create a weekly meal plan where everyone gets to select 12 meals they'd like for the week. Additionally, I also handle the grocery list, and both my dad and I take turns doing the shopping. I took on these tasks to assist my mom since she became disabled during the pandemic due to long-haul the virus. I also contribute by doing about a third of the laundry and taking care of our cats. When it comes to the meal plan, I have a policy of making any dish with the exception of tacos and homemade fettuccine. Tacos and fettuccine can still be added to the plan, but I request that the person who wants them either prepares the meal themselves or asks someone else to make it. These dishes aren't difficult to make. Tacos take around 20 minutes, and fettuccine takes about 40 minutes, mainly involving stirring. I personally don't like these meals, so I usually opt for a sandwich or leftovers when they are on the menu. The only exception to my policy is that I will make these meals if it's someone's birthday. I don't even make them for holidays. Recently, my sister has been expressing dissatisfaction with this policy. She believes that making occasional sacrifices for our family is necessary, and it wouldn't hurt me to cook something I don't like every once in a while. My parents support her perspective, but they understand that it was my choice to take on the cooking responsibilities, so they won't enforce specific meals for me to prepare. Am I the one in the wrong here? Edit. It's important to note that my sister has sensory sensitivities that restrict her from Eating certain dishes I cook. Sometimes, I accommodate her by making a separate meal that suits her needs. Other times, I suggest she prepares a sandwich or eats leftovers instead. TLDR, I volunteered to handle all the cooking for my family, but I've chosen not to make tacos or fettuccine since I dislike them. My sister disagrees with this policy, claiming that we should all make sacrifices for the family. However, my parents support me, recognizing it was my choice to assist with the cooking duties. What do you think are the world's top 3 problems? Alright, y'all, let me just start by saying that if you don't think the world's top 3 problems are effing serious, then you're living under a goddamn rock. First of all, we've got climate change. I mean, it's been scientifically proven that our planet is getting hotter by the minute, and if we don't take some serious action soon, we're all gonna be screwed. I don't know about you, but I'm not trying to live in a world where the weather is unpredictable and extreme, and natural disasters are happening left and right. Secondly, we've got poverty. It's insane to me that there are people in this world living in absolute poverty while others have more money than they know what to do with. And don't even get me started on the fact that there are billionaires out there who could literally solve world hunger and still have money left over to wipe their asses with. It's bullshit, plain and simple. Last, but certainly not least, is the issue of mental health. I don't know if y'all have noticed, but our society is kind of effed up. We're all expected to run ourselves ragged, working 9-to-5 jobs, raising families, and still finding time to maintain a social life. It's no wonder that so many people are suffering from anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues. And the worst part is, there's still so much stigma surrounding mental health that people are afraid to speak up and get the help they need. So there you have it, folks, the world's top 3 problems, and they're all pretty effing serious if you ask me. But I'm not just here to run my mouth. What can we do about it? Well, for starters, we can start taking climate change seriously and do our part to reduce our carbon footprints. We can donate to charities that support poverty relief and work towards more equitable systems. And we can create safe spaces for people to talk about their mental health and support each other through tough times. It's not going to be easy, but it's worth it if it means making the world a better place for all of us. My selfish wife earns $250,000 a year but refuses to contribute anything to our house other than takeouts every day. Now she's flipping because I'm leaving my job. My wife inherited a large chunk of her late father's sizable estate, and she made it very clear that the money she inherited was supposed to go only to her dad's bloodline, also known as her and our children. That I'm not entitled to a cent of it. She inherited a 5-bedroom mortgage-free house in another state. It's in one of the most high-cost living areas near a private college where nearly all the students come from East Coast private schools. She rented out the house by bedroom to students and gets $6,000 monthly when it's all said and done. The rest of her inheritance is locked in a trust that pays out $15,000 a month. Living in North Dakota, the approximately $252,000 she gets is more than enough to live well for our whole family. However, I feel my wife has been unfair with how she's handled the money. Right away, she rented herself a BMW and then she decided she was done cooking and would order out every day. The problem is I have high cholesterol, and a lot of the foods aren't good for me. I can stomach the fact that her inheritance is hers, but it does hurt that I've never resisted picking up the financial burden when I earned more, but she hoards all her new money. She put her inheritance disbursements and rent income all into accounts under her name, and meanwhile, my job income kept going into joint bank accounts. We live in North Dakota and I make $30,000 a year while my wife worked as an accounts payable clerk, making $32,000. According to her, she hated her job because it was boring. She then quit her job out of the blue last week. She said she looked at her boss who was 50 years old and was not cut out to work until she was old like her. She wanted to pursue her passion for photography but didn't want to earn money from it. So she quit. But the problem is that she quit because she gets $250,000 effort-free. I don't benefit from that but still have to pay for the mortgage and other household expenses since she refuses to pay for them using her inheritance money, citing it as joint expenses. It's not so much about me wanting to upgrade my lifestyle but the fact she's saying that her contribution to the mortgage and other household expenses, besides the takeout, is now zero since she has no job. I will have to carry 100% of that burden while she enjoys her inheritance. We got in a fight and I threatened to quit my job too if we were all quitting jobs now because work is hard. Her rationalization was that she buys takeout every day for us now, so my job was enough to pay for our mortgage. She also said that I should keep my job because if I get sick, I'll need it to pay medical bills since she refuses to use her inheritance for that either. Am I the a-hole for being annoyed at her selfishness? My husband choked me. I've always believed in the power of truth, no matter how raw or uncomfortable it may be. So here I am, ready to tell you a story that will send shivers down your spine. Brace yourself, because it's about to get intense. Growing up, my parents were never what you'd call the perfect couple. Their fights would shake the walls and leave scars on my innocence. The sound of shattered glass became the melody of my childhood, and the bruises on my mother's face were the horrifying artwork that decorated our home. I swore to myself that I would never let such darkness touch my own life. But as fate would have it, I found myself in a relationship that would soon become more chaotic and suffocating than anything I had ever imagined. His name was Mike, a charming and charismatic man who swept me off my feet. The passion between us felt like a firestorm, burning bright and engulfing everything in its path. But little did I know that beneath his enchanting smile hid a dangerous darkness. At first, his possessiveness appeared as an act of love. He would shower me with affection and compliments, ensuring that no other man dared to come near me. But gradually, his grip tightened, and I found myself suffocating under his iron grasp. One fateful night, after a heated argument, His anger burst forth like a volcano. His hands, once gentle, now wrapped tightly around my throat, cutting off my breath. Gasping for air, I desperately fought against his grip, clawing at his arms and scratching at his face. But the terror in his eyes matched the pain in mine, and in that moment, I realized that love had morphed into something much more sinister. I knew I had to escape, to save myself from this raging hurricane of a man. With a strength I never knew I possessed, I managed to break free from his clutches. Gasping for air and covered in bruises, I fled from the house that had become a prison. It was a long and harrowing journey to rebuild my life, but I was determined to find solace and safety. It's been years since that dark chapter of my life, and I can proudly say that I've rebuilt my shattered self. I find solace in the arms of a loving and understanding partner, a woman who supports me unconditionally. But the scars of that horrifying experience still haunt me. Nights are sometimes filled with restless sleep and vivid flashbacks. Yet, I find strength in sharing my story, in raising awareness about the intricate web of domestic violence, and in reminding others that they, too, can escape the clutches of their personal demons. So, my dear friends, if you find yourself caught in a turbulent hurricane of abuse, remember that you're not alone. Seek help, confide in someone you trust, and find the strength to break free from the chains that bind you. The path to freedom may be treacherous, but it is one worth fighting for. And as for me, well, I'm still learning to find my footing in this new world I've created. I'm discovering who I am and what I'm capable of. I'm finding courage to take risks and to speak my truth. I'm learning to stand tall and to never give up, even when the odds seem insurmountable. My journey is far from over, and I'm ready to face whatever comes my way. I'm ready to embrace the beauty of life and to never let fear stand in my way. I'm ready to keep walking, no matter what obstacles lie ahead. I'm ready to keep fighting and to emerge stronger than ever before. So, my dear friends, let's keep going, together. Who knows what jaw-dropping moments await. But one thing is for certain, I am ready. Are you? What would you name the first habitable Earth-like planet we colonize? You know that habitable Earth-like planet we finally colonized? Well, let's just say poop hit the fan real quick. First of all, we had some trouble coming up with a name for the damn thing. Everyone wanted to name it after themselves or their favorite anime character or some poop like that. But eventually, we settled on crap attack security. You know, because we had to deal with a lot of crap and we needed to secure our new home. But the real shit show happened a few weeks after we landed. We were all settling in, getting our poop together, building our little homes and whatnot, when suddenly we started experiencing some weird side effects. People were getting sick, and not just a little sick, they were shitting their pants. Literally. Turns out, the planet was covered in some kind of alien bacteria or virus that effed with our digestive systems. The whole place was a breeding ground for poop. And let me tell you, it was not pretty. It smelled like Satan's asshole and looked like a war zone. But here's where things get even crazier. The leaders of our little colony decided the best way to deal with the poop situation was to create an entire security force dedicated solely to cleaning up our fecal mess. That's right, we had a team of people whose sole job was to pick up our poop. And let me tell you, those guys were insane. They took their job way too seriously. They were like top-level military operatives, fully equipped with hazmat suits and flamethrowers. They took no poop, pun intended. But despite all the craziness, we eventually got our poop together, literally. We figured out a way to contain the bacteria and prevent any future poop attacks, as we affectionately called them. And now, crap attack security is thriving. So there you have it, folks, the twisted tale of the planet we call home. It may be a little effed up, but hey, we make do with what we've got. I exposed my evil mother during my father's obituary. My dad died December 1, 2022. He briefly lived with me before his passing after a long stint of being chronically ill for the past 15 plus years. As his health declined, he relied more on my mom for things. Prior to this, she was never a great person and fully took advantage of his disability and mobility issues as he declined. For years she claimed to be separated and divorced, talking to other men on the internet. She made claims many times she was going to move away and marry someone else. In addition, she took advantage of him financially. We tried every legal avenue we could find to have her kicked out, arrested, or force her out, but those attempts were met with responses that it was a civil matter and there was nothing that could be done. He made me a durable POA and added me to all his accounts. This is a small portion of her abuse, but I promise her actions were no less than neglectful and exploitative. I'd tried for years to get my dad to move in with me, but he wasn't leaving the house he worked so hard to pay for. I brought him home on hospice the day after Thanksgiving and made sure his final days were the best they could be. After meeting with the funeral home to carry out his final wishes, I was told they required consent from my mother to allow me to cremate him. It was no surprise she initially told me no and only agreed after I allowed her to keep the Social Security survivor benefits, which would have been hers anyway. I wrote his obituary and left her out of it. There was not a single word or mention he'd ever been married or had a spouse. I didn't feel she deserved to be recognized or viewed as a grieving widow when she spent their marriage as a SHT spouse in person. She lost her mind and there were many questions from friends and family alike. I've spent years in therapy working through maternal narcissistic abuse and believe if she didn't want me to talk about it, she shouldn't have done it. When people asked about it, I was honest about the years of abuse my father and I endured from her. I've completely ruined the public image and victim complex she spent years creating. I might be the villain and I in this scenario, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
Former spoiled rotten kids, when did the real world really hit you? I was a spoiled rotten child and also into my teen years. My parents bought me a brand new red convertible for my 16th birthday. I threw a fit over it because what I actually wanted was my brother's old car, that we still had, which was dark blue in color. I was so shallow and a horrible person back then. So what really turned me around? That next summer I took a job as a camp counselor at a local day camp. I did not have to work, but I was bored and sounded like something easy to do. God, I was so wrong. This day camp was specifically geared to the lower classes who could not afford childcare during the summer. We served them breakfast, lunch, and an afternoon snack. For a lot of the camp kids, this was all they would eat that day, and on Fridays they would beg for extra food/snacks to take home for themselves and or their siblings because they may not get to eat again until Monday. This really hit me hard, but the part that got me the most. This one kid, around 5 to 6, would refuse to take their shoes and socks off, even if we were going to the public pool that day. I couldn't understand why until one day he came in limping, like his feet were causing him so much pain. I convinced him to let me help him get his shoes and socks so I could see what might be bothering him. Once I did, it took everything in me not to break down right there. His socks were covered in blood. His poor tiny little feet were covered in sores and his toes seemed to curl under a bit. He was in so much pain from the state of his feet. As it turns out, he had been wearing shoes about 3 sizes too small. His family couldn't afford new shoes? I took my lunch break and went out to buy him new socks and a few pairs of shoes. This broke me. Which I definitely needed. It changed my way of thinking forever.
What's your creepiest glitch in the Matrix or unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? I have a good one. I was about 12 years old, and woke up in the middle of the night needing to take a leak. I walked across the hall to the little bathroom, hit the lights, and was about to reach for the toilet when I glanced up and saw a face in the mirror. It was not my face. It was as if someone was on the other side, standing to the right, with their face right next to the glass, staring at me. I only saw it for the briefest moment, but it is seared into my brain. I screamed, and ran out of there to find my dad. Of course, my dad investigated, then calmed me down, or tried to. Eventually we had a prayer session, because I was so freaked out. Eventually I must have gone back to sleep. Fast forward to my 30s. I'd forgotten all about the event. One night while visiting, my dad quietly brings it up. Remember that one time you saw a face in the mirror? It suddenly came back to me in a rush of memory, sending a chill down my spine. Yay, I remember. Well, he said, I sometimes think about that night. He looked down at the floor, with a serious expression. I saw it too. He went on to describe exactly what I'd seen. We have no idea what that was. Apparently when he investigated, he saw it and had a freak out of his own. Apparently the prayer session was as much for his own nerves as mine. I respect him for keeping that tidbit from me till my 30s, but I kinda wish he'd never told me.
My best friend's fiancé fingered me in their engagement party while I was wasted, but she doesn't care because he's done this before. My best friend since childhood had her engagement party and it did not go down as expected. We're really close, so when she told me that she was engaged, we partied all night long, just the two of us. I thought we had an inseparable bond, but now I'm not so sure. It was all because of her fiancé. He was an all-right kind of guy, and he was a good friend that I could count on. He's very logical and helped me out with some emotional problems with just logic, but he effed everything up when he stopped using that brain of his and thought with his PP. Her engagement party started out with all of her friends, more than 20 people, but ended with just us 3 and another one of our close friends. We got so sh-to-faced, I thought we would never recover. The plan was to stay the night because I was almost an hour from home, and I didn't mind one bit because it meant I would get to spend all day with 2 important people in my life. We chatted, opened her gifts, played some pool. It was such a great night. I started getting the spins around 2 a.m. and then passed out in the first bed I saw, leaving the 3 of them to continue on with their night. Next thing I know, I'm laying in bed with my legs open. I was wearing a dress, getting fingered. I was in shock at first, and with me being so wasted, I was just trying to process everything that was happening. I figured by the weight next to me and by the feeling of the hand that it wasn't either of the girls I was with. That meant it was either my friend's fiancé or a stranger that joined us while I was passed out. Either way, there was one thing I knew: I was getting assaulted. I started to move a bit, trying to pretend like I was waking up, hoping he would stop, but he didn't. He only went faster. I pushed his hand away and turned over, legs shut tight, but he forced them open after a couple minutes. And tried again. I pushed his hand away and told him to stop, in hopes that he did, but he actually tried it again. That's when I had enough. I got up and punched him so hard in the face, he was knocked off the bed. I screamed for my friends to come in, and turning the light on confirmed it was my friend's fiancé. I was in disbelief that this guy I trusted and knew so well, at his engagement party, would do this to me. The other girl came in and asked what happened, so I told her everything. She said that my best friend passed out, so we had to tell her in the morning. So I did, and she was calm. No, not just calm, she said, not again. I asked her what that meant, and she went on to tell me that this happened with her friend 3 years earlier. I had no idea about this, and she said it's because she kept it a secret so that her fiancé's reputation wouldn't be ruined. She had never spoken to that girl since it happened and managed to get all of her friends to do the same. She said the same would happen to me if I told anybody. She said she was sorry that it happened, but he was wasted, so I can't blame him for something he did when he wasn't sober. I wasn't really planning on telling everyone, but I couldn't believe that she wasn't defending me at all. Instead, she was mad that I had bruised her fiancé's face. He also apologized and said he'll quit drinking because this was becoming a habit of his, and he needed to learn self-control. I don't even know what to do. I trusted these two and they completely betrayed me. I've been ignoring them, but they're trying to pretend like nothing happened. She still tries to call me, and asks me to hang out all the time. My husband put his immigrant cousin before me, so we will be getting a divorce. My husband and I have been together for 5 years. My husband came here from Mexico when he was 13. A couple of months ago his cousin moved from Mexico to the USA for university. She had no friends or family, but they had always been close. My husband and I would always invite her to go out and wanted her to feel at home. One day we decided to go to a dance which she was invited to. We picked her up to find her intoxicated, which we put down to the nerves of socializing in a new country. So we still took her so she could have some fun and hopefully make some friends. I drank 2 margaritas and I started to feel slightly intoxicated. I decided not to dance because the week before I had been very ill and I still had shortness of breath. So my husband took his cousin out to dance with the intention of preventing any creep from taking advantage of her. They danced and everything was well until she got kicked out. When it happened, my husband didn't tell me anything, so I went to look for them because I couldn't see them and was getting worried someone may have creeped on his cousin. They were not inside, so I had a feeling to go to my truck, and there I saw her with no undies on and my husband between her legs. She had the courage to tell me he was still inside so I could look away, and as I did I heard my husband finish. After he did, he rushed out of the car to explain himself. His justifications did not work and he was furious. He ended up laying hands on me until I agreed to testify on his behalf.
I almost unalived the person stealing my lunch. Am I the a-hole for sending my coworker into anaphylactic shock? I'm at a loss here, guys. Realistically, I know I'm in the clear. Legally, I'm in the clear. But I'm being vilified by my coworkers, and I'm genuinely considering quitting my job because of this mess. So I work a pretty standard day job, and at night I help my friend at her restaurant, which serves an assortment of Thai cuisine. I'm insanely picky, but I fell in love with this peanut sauce the main chef makes, and he showed me how to make it, so about once a week I take it on either noodles or stir-fry to my day job for lunch. People know this and a handful have tried it. It smells nutty, it tastes nutty. It's white girl pad Thai, basically. Lately my lunches have been disappearing, or I'll open my lunchbox to find half of my food missing. I've tried addressing it, but nothing has been changing, and I was pretty sure it was one of the new hires that was doing it, but had no proof. Until now. Thursday I took my noodles, and my entire Tupperware was missing, which hasn't happened before. I'm pissed, but what can I do? A coworker shared her pizza with me and that was that, until today. My boss confronted me and accused me of poisoning my noodles because his daughter, one of the new girls, borrowed my lunch and had to be hospitalized. Turns out she's severely allergic to nuts, ate some and boom. Anaphylaxis. She used an EpiPen, had to be hospitalized, and now her dad is trying to hold me accountable for her bills and condition, but I don't see it. Why should I pay? I don't mark my food as an allergen because I'm not allergic to it. She was just dumb enough to steal from me and eat something she can't have. But he's being hateful, and some of my older coworkers are icing me out because I warned him I'd report any harassment to HR if he tried anything funny. Brown nosers, I guess. My friend is aware and offered me a full-time job, but I just can't help but feel it's unfair. At the same time, I could have unalived his daughter though. So, am I the a-hole?
My autistic brother poured maple syrup on his crush as a way to tell her she's really sweet, and now she's pressing charges. My brother is currently 15 years old and he has high-functioning autism. He is an intelligent person, he reads, writes poems, is interested in history, and is overall a smart person. However, a problem with him is that, like most autistic people, he struggles with socializing, and sadly a lot more than most people on the spectrum. Even within the family, he pulls pranks on us, pranks that are not funny at all and pranks which cross boundaries. I have been the victim of an SSI prank despite him knowing that my best friend committed SSI. I scolded him after, and even though he apologized for upsetting me, he was still seemingly unable to understand why this was wrong. He pranked my mother too many times, one of his pranks being slapping her behind with a spatula over and over and going, "Order up, Squidward," which I don't even understand how that can be a prank. We do forgive him for these things, however, and we love him, as he is a really sweet boy but just doesn't understand social cues. One thing that he greatly struggles with is interacting with women. I try to give my best advice to him, telling him to be confident, be himself, and try to make her laugh. That kind of backfired when the first time he ever went on a date, he spent the entire time trying to make her laugh by telling her SpongeBob-themed jokes. They are actually quite funny though. Why is Patrick so dumb? Because he lives under a rock. Anyway, my brother has recently developed a crush on a girl in his class. I know the girl, her name is Kim and she is really sweet. I am friends with her older sister. Well, my brother and I are very close, and he told me about Kim for the first time a month and a half ago. He told me that he thought she was really pretty and he couldn't stop staring at her whenever they shared class. I told him that it's really cute that he has a crush, but advised him to stop staring at her as it can make women uncomfortable. He responded by saying, "Yeah, I know, she has already told me to stop being weird and looking at her once, so I've stopped." I don't get the big problem though. I went on to explain to him why the staring would make her uncomfortable, as people generally don't like being watched as it feels like their personal space is being invaded. He responded, I'm not invading her personal space. It's not like I'm running over to her giving her a massive hug before each class. I told him that's how it is, and you can also invade people's personal space mentally, not just physically. We had to talk about it where I told him that he will have to eventually just approach the girls he likes. He can't forever resort to loving them from a distance. This seemed to strike a chord in him. I have told him this before, but it seemed to connect this time, and I was truly pleased about that. He asked me what the best way to do so was, and I told him not to approach her when she's in a group, approach her in a suitable environment, like if you guys are ever close enough to be near each other during lunch and she's alone, and to do his best not to force the interaction. He then asked me what the best way to approach her was, and I told him that the best way is to just seem genuine and with good intentions. I told him that whenever I've been asked out before, I appreciated it when instead of trying to be Mr. Smooth, the guy said something along the lines of, "Hey, so here's the thing. I just think you're really cute and seem fun to be around. I'd like to get to know you better. I'd love to take you out for lunch sometime." My brother nodded his head in astonishment and told me he was going to try that the next day. Well, the next day he came to me telling me that he got rejected. I consoled him, and he cried about it, which really hurt me. I told him that it's okay, there's plenty of fish in the pond, and not distress about it. Well, he did not take this for an answer, and he told me that perhaps what Kim needs is not to be asked out in such a basic way. I told him that was likely not the case, but he insisted on doing the more grandiose gesture for her when the snowball came around. I laughed and told him to go ahead, thinking he was not actually going to do it. Fast forward to a month, it was now a week until the snowball. One night my brother came to me excitedly, telling me that Kim has not been asked out by anyone, and the guy she asked out rejected her and she looked down about it. He told me this was his chance and told me he had something amazing prepared for her. I asked him if he was actually going to go through with whatever he planned to, and he said yes. I asked him what it was and he told me not to worry. And like an idiot, I didn't worry. It's not like he would lather himself in peanut butter and walk up to her asking her to be the crunchy to his smooth. Well, the next day my brother enacted the plan. I was not there to see it, but the recount I got from my brother made me go through the entire scope of human emotions all within the space of 5 minutes, as well as experience the 5 stages of grief. Turns out my brother found out weeks prior that Kim really likes pancakes with maple syrup by eavesdropping one of her conversations with her friends, and he decided to use this to his advantage. So he came into school with a glass bottle of maple syrup. He waited until lunch when Kim was sitting at a table and eating food, and he walked up behind her and planted a piece of paper on the desk that said, "You're sweeter than maple syrup, will you go to the snowball with me?" Then proceeded to rain maple syrup down onto her head. She got up and screamed, then started crying while yelling at my brother, calling him a selection of names, even referring to him as a and R-worded douchebag. Someone on the table next to him was recording the video her friends got in my brother's face, and one of them proceeded to slap him. Embarrassed, my brother didn't even try to defend himself and left. He didn't even do anything. He just came home and waited for me or our parents to come home. My parents came home and had already found out from the school what happened, and they were extremely disappointed with my brother, and he threw me under the bus, pointing to me and saying she said it was okay to do. My parents sent him up to his room and then had a talk with me where they scolded me about encouraging him. I explained my point of view and my parents calmed down after I told them I did not encourage him. I just never shut his idea down, as he never told me what it would be specifically, and I didn't think he'd actually do anything this stupid. I feel really bad for her and have expressed to my brother that what he did was horrendous. This action of his has put a huge rift in between him and the rest of the family. It's been 2 weeks since the incident and my brother has been expelled from school. This has not been enough for Kim and her parents, however. Apparently, Kim's hair was very damaged after my brother did what he did, and by the time Kim got home to shower, the maple syrup had dried in her hair and wouldn't come out after showering, meaning she had to cut it and now wears a low cut. The mental damage and emotional distress that my brother has caused her must be enormous. They're now suing us and I don't know what to do.
I married my high school bully. She was the popular girl in high school and I was the super tall, awkward lesbian. We were on the volleyball team together and she would always get onto me for messing up. She was never friendly to me and would always leave me out of things intentionally. I hated her personality but always had the hots for her and fantasized about her despite her treatment of me. She was beautiful in everything. I wasn't cool and confident. I was 1 year above her throughout high school. I graduated in 2015 and her in 2016. During my senior year, I made some big plays during a big game and she sort of began warming up to me. After school one day, I walked past her and her boyfriend as they were getting into a huge argument. He was getting into her face and nobody else was around. I could feel something really bad was about to happen, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. I walked over to him and told him to back off. Surprisingly, he did, perks to being 6 feet 4 inches and therefore bigger than most guys. He called me some choice words and went on his way. I asked her if she was okay and she immediately thanked me for interfering. I could tell she was shook up, so I offered to give her a ride home, which she accepted. Turns out she lived just down the street from me. She thanked me again and thus began a friendship. She apologized for the way she had treated me, saying she was just playing it up for the other girls and that she had matured beyond that. Long story short, I eventually confessed my feelings towards her and she admitted that she had developed similar feelings towards me. It was confusing for her because she had never been attracted to another woman before, so it took her some time to accept it. She still claims to this day that I'm the only girl she's ever had feelings for. All of her celeb crushes are guys and it honestly makes me proud that I was the one able to win her over. We started dating in 2016 and I proposed in February of 2018. We married last September and are currently expecting a daughter together.
My boyfriend just left me behind during an earthquake while I'm pregnant. This just happened. I live in a country known for earthquakes this time of the year. My boyfriend and I were together upstairs. I was on a work conference video call whilst he was watching TV, when suddenly the alarm started going off in our building and on our phones, and the building started to shake a bit. We both knew what was happening immediately, but the suddenness of such a situation made me freeze. It took me a moment to register what was happening around me as I was frozen, but by the time I got up, he had already taken our 2 dogs and was running downstairs without me. As mentioned, I was on a conference call. I had on no shoes on and no bra on either, and I'm 8 months pregnant with an affair partner's child. My boyfriend forgave me and agreed to raise the child. Anyways, I tried to act quickly and made it downstairs and into the basement designed to protect us from earthquakes where he already was with the dogs. Luckily everyone was fine. When we got back to the apartment, I told him that how he acted really upset me. He did not even hesitate to leave me behind to fend for myself and my unborn child. He defended his actions and basically told me I needed to act quickly or I'm effed in those situations and it's not his responsibility to take care of me and not his child. We got into an argument about it as I told him he said he was over me cheating on him, but now his actions show otherwise. Anyways, I told him it's not as if I needed him to hold my hand during that moment of panic, but he didn't even wait a second to make sure I was good to go. I'm really upset because obviously I'm not in able-bodied shape due to being pregnant and I'm hurt. His reaction was basically, "It's your fault, you're slow, I'm not going to wait for you."
I punched an autistic kid after he groped me and now everyone hates me. That grope was the last straw. I have known Troy since nursery, kindergarten for Americans or just anyone, and he has always been babied. It was always his autism that made him who he was. I don't know why, but he always had a crush on me. I rejected him gently multiple times but he never took no for an answer. As we grew older, he got worse. He started commenting on my chest, asking to touch them, asking to see them. His friends kept trying to convince me to show him because nobody would be nice enough to give him a chance, and in year 7, 6th grade, he started groping me. I told teachers but they kept saying that his autism doesn't make him know any better. It was only me. He got jealous when I was in the presence of another guy. He would have meltdowns and I got into trouble because I knew how upset he would get. No, I didn't. It was like my only purpose was to be his. I wasn't allowed to be my own person. The groping continued. I kept telling him to stop. He didn't listen. I remember crying on the floor and teachers just kept saying that his autism makes him like this and that I am being a good person by taking care of him. His groping hurt. I don't know how to explain it. He just grabbed my chest and butt hard. And it hurt. The groping continued for 4 years. I was always his caretaker, his girlfriend, his best friend, his. I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't take it anymore. It was hot and I wore a skirt, and he proceeded to put his hands up my skirt and groped my butt. I lost it and punched him around the nose. His nose got broken and unfortunately now I'm getting put into isolation for 2 months for bullying an autistic kid. He's not a kid though. He's a 16-year-old. He acts normal around his friends. He treats everyone else with respect. He's not a kid. Now everyone hates me. I have been receiving death threats and people have been saying he should have done worse. Now all I want to do is curl up and die. Maybe I should have been nicer. Maybe I should have been more sympathetic. Maybe I should have just accepted it. I could have been his only chance. For the record, I don't despise autistic people. He is not a representative of them. He is just an awful person. Troy is just a horrible person. Giving my context, his parents are prominent people in our community. His dad is a third-generation army something, IDK, and his mom is known for always holding all of the stuff for kids, like the summer fairs etc. She is also part of the school board and friends with the higher-ups if you will, which is why this happened at all. I wasn't technically his caretaker because I didn't have to feed him, clothe him etc. I just had to be his friend. His dad is also friends with the police station. They go way back, so that's another reason why they didn't do much, or just took a statement then wrote him off as mentally disabled. And the police here just suck ass here. Police officers have SA'd many women before here. They just get let off unfortunately. On to a semi-update. Firstly, my parents will look into lawyers. We just couldn't afford one, and I was always too scared to get one. I guess it was because I have been so neglected, that I just thought nobody would believe me. However, my other relatives said that they would chip in and pay for a good lawyer. Meanwhile, my parents took me out of the school and I will stay at my grandma's for a while to recover. My auntie is also going to pay for my therapy, so I will enjoy that much needed therapy. Thank you so much for the kind words. I hope you all miraculously wake up with more money in your bank's accounts than you expected.
My stepdaughter ran away from the birthday party I threw for her. My husband has a 16-year-old daughter named Lucy and I have a 10-year-old son named Toby. Lucy never recognized us as family and when she introduces us, we are dad's wife and dad's wife's son. Birthdays have always been important to me and I throw huge parties for them. I offer to throw Lucy a party but she refuses every year, and everything related to her birthday is banned from the house. Since she is turning 16 this year, I decided to throw her a surprise party. We organized it with Toby, invitations to her classmates, family and close friends, games, karaoke, catering and decorations. Not even my husband knew. I took the day off from work and Toby skipped school to fix everything. At night, my husband and Lucy arrived and we yelled surprise. They didn't look happy. My husband didn't say anything to me and Lucy disappeared almost immediately. The party was amazing. When bringing the cake to sing happy birthday, I called for Lucy, but she wasn't at the party. We looked for her around the house, but she wasn't there, and neither was my husband. After half an hour of trying to call them both on their cell phones, the mood got ruined and everyone left. The two returned after midnight and didn't feel guilty about leaving. I immediately asked them why they left. Lucy didn't say anything and went to her bedroom, and my husband told me to calm down. He explained that Lucy wasn't feeling well, so they went to the beach. I scolded him for not telling me, but he just shrugged and said you were too busy enjoying the party to notice and went to sleep. It's been 3 days and the two act as if nothing happened. When I try to talk about it, Lucy looks at me like I'm crazy and my husband doesn't call her out on it. I'm tired of her indifference. I threatened my husband to take Toby and leave if they didn't open about it, but he shrugged and told me to calm down. Entitled father destroys restaurant equipment because he can't find a straw. About a year ago I ended up changing jobs to move into a higher position, and I went from team leader at my old place to a supervisor at my new one. And so far it's been so much better with very few difficult encounters until recently. In our shop near the front door we have a Tango Ice Blast slushy machine, and we keep all our cups for said machine behind the till. It's normally pretty popular on the hot days and they can sell quite fast, but we tend to keep the cups and lids stocked up pretty well. The straws however are a different matter. Other drink machines are right next to the Ice Blast machine and all require the same straws, so we just keep them in a box between the two. However, a lot of people will take multiple straws when they buy one drink, so we run out pretty fast. A father came in today with his daughter and did his shopping, and asked a few times where the cups were for the Tango machine. We explained they were behind the counter and you pay for them before you make the slushy. Eventually he comes to the till and pays for a regular cup, hands it to his daughter, and she runs off to pour the drink while he packs his shopping. He walks to meet her and we eventually see him begin opening the drawers and doors on the front of the machine where the gas canister and flavor syrup is kept. We tell him to leave them alone and he just screams back, "You've got no effing straws." I notice that he's right and ask one of the staff on the shop floor to go run upstairs and get another box. She does, but right away we see the father getting impatient. "Where the F are the straws? I've got to get my daughter to swimming." I tell him it will just be a minute, as my colleague has gone to get some. I begin serving the next customer and therefore don't notice the father open the drawers again. He grabs one of the syrup holders, basically big boxes full of thick runny syrup, attached to a hose with a special connector, and he yanks it out of the machine. This caused the plastic connector that was attached to the box to rip off and made syrup fly everywhere. His daughter and the machines were all covered. He screams at us, asking how we could be so stupid to keep all this sticky poop in a box, and explains he was looking for the straws. I don't get to say anything before he grabs his kid, gives us the finger and storms off, without getting his straw. Took like an hour and a half to clean it all up. My shoes are still sticky. And we still can't use the machine since the connector is broke.
Have you ever met a dangerous person and not known it at the time? Maurice was a soft-spoken and mild-mannered boy in my class. He was friendly and pleasant to all. I cannot think of a single moment where he said or did something that angered or offended anyone while in school. He lived further up the hill from where my school was, practically walking distance from the school. Girls confided in him due to his reserved nature and boys respected his kindness. Once he invited a few of us guys to his house for food and to watch Spider-Man, the very first movie, on his PC, after school. Maurice was the last boy one would think of when the word dangerous was mentioned. When we entered Form 5, a boy named Kevin entered the school and stoked fear upon many of us. I say boy, but he was already an 18-year adult when he came. He had transferred from a really rough school and practically every week he was involved in vicious fights or would be seen breaking class to smoke behind the labs. He would harass random boys, threaten them for their money, and if they didn't cough up he'd shove, slap or thrash them, according to his mood. Maurice happened to pass by him one day and judging Maurice to be harmless he tackled Maurice for some money. Maurice ignored him, but Kevin grabbed him by the shirt and slapped him on both cheeks, warning him that next time things will be worse. Maurice's shirt was dirty and his face red from the fracas, but he remained silent and walked away. After school ended I was walking with my friends out the compound and down the hill when we saw trouble was brewing. We saw a gang of no less than 20 young men from the area had accosted Kevin. Kevin's face was bruised and swollen, eyes red, and most of his shirt buttons were ripped out from a prior struggle. They dragged Kevin to Maurice and asked what to do with him. Maurice, in his soft voice, told them that was enough. The men shoved Kevin off and fired kicks behind him as he ran down the hill, thoroughly learning his lesson. The hill where the school lay was Maurice's turf. Kevin learned a lesson that day. The most dangerous people are sometimes the ones you least suspect.
Today I messed up by sending a picture of my cat. I've always had cats in my life, so when I moved into a new apartment and had more disposable income, I went out and adopted a cat. I took so many pictures of him, and wanted to send a picture of this cute cat I had gotten, so I carefully picked one that I thought showed his lazy personality. I sent it to my boss, my family, my friends. I was so proud of my cat that anyone that I could remotely make an excuse to send a picture to, I did. I got the generic response back like, "Oh, did you get a cat? Looks cute," and I thought nothing of it, just sharing a cute pic of a cat. 3 weeks later, I went to get coffee with my friend, and at a break in the conversation, she pulled up the picture that I had sent her and asked if I see anything that shouldn't be in the picture. I said no. And she pointed behind his head and was like, "What about this?" There was an S toy behind his head. The worst thing is that it wasn't even a S toy that was being used. I had gotten sent the wrong size and just had left it and forgotten all about it, but I couldn't even say that without sounding like it was just an excuse. I hate myself.
What's something someone said to you during your grieving that stuck with you? I have no idea what you're going through. After losing my dad to cancer, my sister-in-law offered these words. I knew she was the only person who did know what I was going through. She had recently lost her mother to cancer. She had just gone through the same pain of losing her favorite person. But she knew that everyone's relationships are different, and everyone experiences pain and grief differently. It was the only thing that actually comforted me during that time. Having someone acknowledge that they did not understand what I was going through, proved that she actually did. Even if you have experienced a similar situation, you can never truly understand someone else's grief and emotions. For me, it was more damaging when people thought they did. No, he's not in a better place, he wanted to stay here, this is the better place. He's not at peace, and you'd know that if you understood what he went through. It's nice you think he's in heaven, now prove it exists. No, you don't understand because you lost someone too, you just don't. The only thing I saw that helped me was the ball in the box metaphor. Imagine a big ball bouncing around a little box. On one side is a red button. That button is the overwhelming pain and grief you feel. When you first lose someone, that box is hitting that pain button constantly. There is no escaping it. As time goes on, the ball starts to shrink. It starts to hit the pain button less frequently. The pain is still there, but it doesn't overwhelm you as often. As the years go by, the ball continues to shrink. It will never go away. That button could trigger that pain at any time, but it happens less often, and it becomes easier to manage. Thank you all for listening. Any thoughts or similar stories?
Doctors of Reddit, what's the biggest case of faking it you've ever seen? My cousin got glasses. Her 7-year-old little sister also wanted glasses because she thought it was so cool to wear them. So she started telling her teachers she couldn't read what was on the chalkboard, and she'd squint at home, and go incredibly close to the TV to watch things because she said she couldn't see things clearly. Her parents got worried and took her to the doctor. She read everything wrong on the vision test. Everyone seemed convinced that she needed glasses, but the doctor was a little concerned because the tests indicated she needed really thick glasses, and usually that wasn't the case unless there was a family history of vision issues. Her parents both had 20/20 vision and her sister only had astigmatism. They all realized she was faking it, so the doctor told her parents in front of her that she'd need some pretty intense eye surgery so she'd be able to see without glasses. They even wheeled in a machine to make it convincing to say they could do the surgery right then and there. She freaked out, confessed to faking it all and started to cry. She got grounded for a while.
Am I the jerk for throwing away my boyfriend's potentially illegal yogurt collection? I'm a 29, my boyfriend is a 30. We've been living together for 2 years in a little studio in a very expensive, big US city. My boyfriend grew up rurally, with lots of space, enough to collect all kinds of things. He collected action figures and video games and all the normal kid stuff when he was young, but as he grew older, he became interested in more unusual things. As a teen, he had 8 guinea pigs, of different types from different breeders. Since Tide Pods were released 7 years ago, he saved one of every kind of Tide Pod. He's got a big box of an international variety of electric insulators, those little ceramic hats that power lines wrap around on power poles. He's not a hoarder, he's usually neat, just used to having lots of space for his bizarro collections. At his parents' ranch, he has 2 big rooms full of containers of weird, and impressive, things. He recently became interested in yogurt. He's always hated dairy products, until about a year ago. He not just started drinking milk and sharing ice cream with me, but he's found a love for yogurts. So he now collects them. Of course, the problem is that they're perishable. So, until earlier today, our little 550 square foot studio contained about 2,100 cups of yogurt. It comes in tons of varieties, different types, flavors, textures, containers, made by different companies in different countries. This is like crack to my boyfriend. So he tried to pretty much save a sample of everything he could find. He filled our fridge, bought a new fridge, and then another tiny bedside fridge. He said he didn't want to walk to the fridge at night, but it was obviously a ruse to get more yogurt space. These fridges all filled up with his yogurts, and if you keep them for long, they smell bad. Sometimes the packaging breaks. So our apartment was smelling like rotten milk for the last 2 weeks, and my boyfriend's attitude was, oh, it's fine and just deal with it for a little longer, until I pulled the plug and threw it all out this morning. I was looking at my groceries, which I had to put beside the fridge because there was no space, and everything smelled like death, and then I kinda snapped and threw it all away. My boyfriend is understandably upset. We've been arguing about whether I crossed a line by throwing away his stuff, and he's especially upset because he, of course, had rare yogurts that were hard to find. In particular, he had some Cuban and Iranian yogurts that you can't get in the US. But I know that we have trade sanctions against Iran and Cuba, so I don't know if it was even legal for him to have them. I asked where he got his Iranian yogurt, but he kept insisting the Iranian yogurt is not the issue here and that the real issue was me throwing out his precious yogurts without his permission. Am I the jerk here? Do I need legal advice? Thanks in advance. I'm so exasperated. My biological family has found my little brother's social media and I am beyond pissed. Long story short, I was physically and sexually abused by my father when I was young, and it led to me getting taken away by social services and him spending the rest of his life in prison. I was adopted by a loving family and that should have been the end of it. In December I found out that my bio father offed himself in prison. Shortly afterward, my adoptive parents started getting harassed on Facebook by members of my biological father's family, because they still after 17 effing years believe that I made the whole thing up for attention and that he would never do such a thing. They can't harass me anymore because I already deleted all my social media and blocked all of their numbers, so now they've resorted to bullying other members of my family. The only silver lining I guess is that they're a bunch of dumb inbred rednecks, so none of them have managed to figure out where I live yet. I have a little brother, he's only 13, He knows I'm adopted, but before yesterday he didn't know anything about my life before I was adopted. But yesterday he showed me messages he got on his private Instagram account of all things, and I am beyond infuriated to see the absolutely horrible things they've been sending him. Me and my parents basically had to sit down and explain to him who these people are, what all of these words mean, and all the traumatic crap that happened to me before he was born. I don't even know what to say anymore. We haven't said a word to each other since last night. My parents were already trying to pursue legal action, but since the only thing they've actually done is send mean words over the internet, I'm not sure it'll go anywhere. If you find this post, consider it an open invitation. Stop harassing my family and come at me in real life, you effing inbredland Wales. I hate my son because he killed my wife. I was a mess before meeting my wife. I was an alcoholic, had poor hygiene, was hopping from job to job, but she saw something in me that nobody else did, not even me. I loved her so much. We were only 1 year into our relationship before getting married. I didn't listen to people saying it was too soon. I was so in love. She turned my life upside down. I was a better man all thanks to her. I was 23 when she gave birth to my son. That was the happiest day of my life. Everything was going great. As he got older, he resembled his mother so much. He was the male version of my wife. We didn't have a strong bond, but we talked sometimes. He was definitely a lot closer to his mother, but I was okay with that. My life was perfect, but then everything came crashing down in one phone call. I was told my wife and son were in a car accident. I rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately by then my beautiful wife had passed. My son was still alive, unconscious on a hospital bed, but at that moment all I could think of was how my soulmate, my love, my everything was gone. However, my son made a full recovery. It hurt my heart every time I looked at him. I began to hate him and avoided him like the plague. The thought of him making it, but not my wife, made me furious. I started drinking again. My mental health was very poor and I'd get into arguments with my son often. My life was the definition of hell. 4 days ago my son was yelling at me for being the worst father ever and was ranting about how he needs help and how horrible his life was. I understood that he was hurting, but so was I. I was ignoring him because I had already heard this rant a million times, but then he snatched a beer out of my hand and threw it on the floor. That's when I snapped. I told him, you're not the only one suffering. Stop being so self-centered, just get over yourself. Then I laid hands on him for yelling at throwing my beer can away. There was more that I was going to say and do to him, but he left the house. I made no effort to follow him, assuming he just needed to be alone. I haven't seen or heard from him since. The police have been looking for him, but deep down I hope he doesn't come back. What a secret someone held all their life. I still can't believe what he did to that poor boy. When I was 18 to 25 I worked at a nursing home and I heard some wild confessions. Most of them aren't that bad. It's just stuff that would have been frowned upon in that small town even today. One that surprised me was a lady that had been a truant officer for the school system for years. Then head of the Board of Education. She asked me to close her door, then to lock it. I didn't lock it and asked her why she wanted it locked. She said she wanted to hook up with me, not the word she used. Said her best times were with other women and they left their underwear on. This lady once pulled my hair at church for saying dang. Then there was Benny. Benny was a former business leader and church deacon. He used to preach brimstone and fire on the radio. Then his son took over. Benny was apparently a wild man in his youth. He'd always talk about partying and telling me that if I wanted to get in a bar fight and raise hell, to do it in another town so nobody would know. One night shortly before he passed away, Benny grabbed my wrist and pulled me closer and said I didn't mean to take that boy's life. I was drunk. Just waving my Glock around trying to scare him. It just went off. Son's name is taking money to the witnesses to get them to change their stories. He just kept repeating the story. And he'd occasionally pause to say where they hid stuff they sell and tell me to line him out something. I never said a word to his family about it. I and the other CNA agreed we didn't want his son to know we knew anything.
The blind child, stabbing. Sylvia pointed a trembling finger at my brother Arthur. Her milky, unseeing eyes gleamed in his direction, and his wife, Agnes, trembled with indignation from across the table. My husband's face colored as he dropped his fork and dragged our daughter back into her bedroom, scolding her as they went. The rest of the night was awkward, and the pep in our conversation never recovered. 2 weeks later, Agnes was stabbed to death in her office parking lot. An inebriated college student found her, almost vomited all over her, and called the cops. My brother swore that he bore no ill will against my daughter, but I could tell that he was lying. One day, the middle-aged woman who taught my daughter how to read her braille called me. "Ma'am, I don't know what's going on, but your daughter's been whispering, electrocution, electrocution, for the past half hour, and it's starting to distract her from her lessons. Could you please talk to her?" I did. Sylvia, in her 9-year-old lack of understanding, told me it was just a cool new word she learned at school. The death of an electrician made headlines the following week. It was a freak accident involving tangled wires and a bucket of water. Sylvia's teacher's face was blurred for privacy, but her voice was as familiar as anything to me. He was my partner, my soulmate. While my husband was working late, I called Sylvia into the living room. "Honey, is there anything Mommy should know?" She hesitated. "Honey, you know you can talk to me." She denied it once more. "I have no secrets from you, Mommy." My husband walked into the living room with his hair tousled and his eyes distant. Instead of rushing to hug her dad, Sylvia simply turned towards him. "Fire," she said. My heart stopped. Every time Sylvia said something like that, it was the person's partner who died, and of that reason too. A fire? Was Sylvia merely making predictions, or was she putting a curse on me for snooping in on her business? Why, this devil child. I grew paranoid, checked the appliances and electronics constantly, and cleared the house of any fire hazards. That was my life over the next few days. All the while, I kept my eyes on Sylvia. I had grown almost hateful towards my own daughter. My husband came home one night, wounded and blackened with soot, while I sat in the living room and Sylvia listened to the radio beside me. "What's the matter?" I asked. He gulped. "One of my colleagues, her house caught fire. She was trapped in, but I managed to escape." That turned the gears in my head. What were you doing in her house? The expression on my husband's face was a sufficient admission of guilt. I opened my mouth to speak, no, to scream, but a smaller voice from beside me looked at me and whispered, "Poisoning."
I am refusing to pay for my son's medication as a punishment. I have a 20-year-old son. I pay for his college expenses and give him a monthly allowance of $300, trying to make his life easier as much as possible. 2 years ago, my son was diagnosed with depression and started taking medication. He stayed on it for 6 months until his condition improved. The doctor then advised him to continue the medication for an additional 2 years as a preventive measure to avoid relapse. I'm responsible for covering the cost of his medication, providing him with an allowance, and paying for his college expenses. I haven't given him any other responsibilities. A couple of days ago, we had an issue between us, and he got upset with me. He hasn't been speaking to me or responding at all, and I got angry at him because I believe he's the one at fault. Today, he asked me for money because his medication is about to run out, and he needs to buy a new supply. I told him that I won't give him the money because he's a grown adult and should take the responsibility to save up and purchase it himself. He got mad and repeatedly told me that he didn't have any money and that I'm being absurd by refusing to pay, especially that I'm putting his health at risk. When my wife found out, she snapped at me and called me an a-hole for apparently caring for revenge more than my son's health. Am I the a-hole for trying to teach my son a lesson? Edit, I am now sleeping on the couch and was voted the a-hole by everyone I spoke to. As a doctor or nurse, what's the nastiest thing you've seen a visitor do with a patient? Not a medical professional, but I could easily qualify as a professional patient. This happened to me. I had just endured a 9-hour surgery on my lumbar spine, and been transferred from recovery to a semi-private room. The pain was unbelievable despite the fentanyl and morphine pump I was attached to, and I was still groggy from anesthesia. Enter my roommate. She was admitted for observation for a broken ankle. Classic southern middle-aged perky church lady. Very perky. Not long after she arrived, followed by husband carrying a monogrammed, riotously floral overnight bag, her church entourage arrived in our small room. My bed was surrounded by my worried husband and parents. At least 10 people crowded her side of the room, spilling over into my side. Not one of these people seemed to notice there was anyone in the other bed, and proceeded to bump into and even sit on the end of my bed, ignoring my cries of pain whenever the bed was jostled. To add to my misery, all these people in a very small, inadequately ventilated room brought the ambient temperature up into the very high 80s. I have had asthma all my life and have developed a phobia of warm, still air. It makes me feel as if I am suffocating. Each time the bed was jostled and I cried out in pain, my husband would politely ask that the crowd not touch my bed. They ignored him. You have to understand at this point that the hub is a very prim and proper Brit and not prone to rude outbursts. Also, his mom was a London nurse during World War II in the Blitz, and eventually emigrated to the US, where she became the night administrator at now closed Henrotin Hospital in Chicago. So the baby boy knows his way around the hospital. Finally, the hubs announced that I had had a serious surgery that day and they were hampering my recovery and he would appreciate it if they would abide by the hospital rules of a 2-visitor limit. After a silent pause to take this in, we lived in Georgia at the time, and his very proper English accent always commanded a bit of respect, and the pastor sat on the end of my bed, squashing my feet and causing me to scream. My parents assisted him back to his feet, and my hubby disappeared amidst the confusion. He returned in less than 5 minutes with the night admin in tow. She flushed out all the visitors and slapped a no visitors sign on the door. Family members are not considered visitors at this hospital. Moral of the story, don't check your manners at the door when you are visiting someone in a hospital setting. There are actually sick people there.
Merry Christmas. What did you guys get? My mother got me a sewing machine. I'm so excited to learn to sew. My in-laws got me my first Squishmallow and it's so soft, I love it. 2006 Harley Davidson Fat Boy. Not new but it's brand new to me. Merry Christmas everyone. I got a puppy. I know a puppy for Christmas isn't something we should encourage, but I have been ill for a couple of years. I've wanted a dog for a long time but I didn't feel it would be fair when I was too ill to walk her or just play. I am finally well enough to do that, and she's adorable. In-laws got me a drone, a cool mug, a Zen garden, and few limited edition comics. I don't like comics, but they really think I do. What's the biggest F up the new guy did? It was me. I was the new guy. On my second day working at Domino's, I spilled an entire maybe 10-pound bag of pepperoni on the floor. I don't know if you know this, but pepperoni is really expensive, even in bulk. I had to sweep it up in full view of all the customers. The manager on shift, thankfully the chill one, told me that I was lucky the boss was away at the time because he would have fired me on the spot. On the day a newish coworker got his forklift license, he proceeded to drive between two parts of the warehouse with the fork up. Straight through the drywall and all the crap in between. License revoked on the spot.
What do you think is the most toxic subreddit? I remember when I first stumbled upon a subreddit that I thought might be helpful, but as I started reading through the posts and comments, I quickly realized I had dove headfirst into one of the most toxic subreddits out there. It was a place where people would tear each other apart over the smallest disagreements, a place where the loudest and most aggressive voices would win out, regardless of how little they actually knew about the subject at hand. I tried to engage in conversation, but no matter what I said, someone would come along and try to sabotage my point of view. They would twist my words, take them out of context, or just outright insult me. It felt like I was trying to reason with a brick wall. I remember one specific post where someone was talking about their struggles with mental health. They were pouring their heart out, looking for support and advice, but instead of finding kindness, they found cruel comments attacking them for being weak or oversensitive. It was like watching someone cry out for help, only to be kicked while they were down. Eventually, I stopped trying to participate and become an observer. It was like watching a car crash. You knew it was going to be painful, but you couldn't look away. And it wasn't just the insults and attacks, it was the sheer amount of hate that was being thrown around. It was like every other post was someone calling someone else a poor devil, or a female, or worse. It felt like I had stumbled into a school playground where everyone was trying to be the biggest bully. Looking back on it now, I can see how toxic that subreddit truly was. It was filled with people who were in pain, but instead of asking for help they took that pain out on others. There was no teacher guiding the conversation, no one trying to keep things civil. It was just a free-for-all. But then something changed. One day, a new user joined the subreddit and started to make a difference. They began to challenge the status quo, to stand up to the bullies, and to offer support to those in need. People started to listen, and slowly but surely the subreddit began to change. It was like a light in the darkness, and I couldn't help but be inspired by it. But as the days went by, I noticed something strange happening. The new user seemed to be stirring up trouble, and I couldn't help but wonder what their endgame was. What was their true motive? What would happen if the darkness took over again? I had to find out. My narcissistic parents told my golden child brother to propose at my wedding because my fiancé loves me and his girlfriend is going to leave him. My brother has always been the favorite because he was planned. My parents only wanted one kid, but they had an accidental pregnancy and had me. They don't believe in abortion, so my mom carried me full term. That didn't stop her from resenting me for being born. My brother makes fun of me by calling me a mistake. That was my nickname growing up and my parents never stopped him from calling me that. In fact, when I went to them crying about it, they just said that he was right because they never wanted another kid. So, after high school I moved out, went to college purely on scholarships and grants, and now I'm living a really good life. The best part? I'm engaged to my beautiful fiancée and I can't wait to marry her in April. She wanted a spring wedding and what my bride-to-be wants, my bride-to-be gets. Well, the problem started last Saturday when my parents called me over to their house to talk about something. They were very cryptic about it and refused to tell me what it was over the phone. When I got there, my older brother was there too, so I knew this wasn't going to be good. My parents sat me down and told me that my brother wants to use my wedding as the perfect day for him to propose to his girlfriend. I laughed in their faces because I couldn't believe they were asking me something so stupid, but they were dead serious. I was instantly mad and told them absolutely not. But they ganged up on me. I was so enraged and through all the abuse and neglect I experienced for 18 years in their faces. I told them that I was miserable living with them and sometimes I wish I hadn't even been born because they clearly never wanted me. My brother laughed and mumbled, "Yeah, who would?" And that pushed me over the edge. I said that if they want to do this, then not only will they all be uninvited, but I'll also cut off the financial support I've been giving monthly since they paid to have my golden child brother go through college by taking out a second mortgage. Because even after all this abuse, I was still helping them out financially while they gave my loser brother everything he wanted, even if it meant they were going to go broke. Without me, they wouldn't have even been able to retire because my brother spent half of their retirement money on boats, an apartment that he completely trashed that ended in him getting kicked out and my parents had to pay for all the damages he caused, and even had a failed business at some point that caused a pretty penny. I, on the other hand, landed a decently high-paying job and have been sending $1,000 to my parents monthly to help ease their mortgage. I didn't ask for a stake in the ownership of their house either because I really don't want it. It was entirely goodwill, but I can cut it off any time I want and right then and there, I really wanted to. However, it was only a threat at the time. I left soon after, really angrily might I add, but my brother came to my home the next day to yell at me that I ruined his big chance. For once in my life, my parents were siding with me and they said they'll evict him if he tries to propose at my wedding. He accused me of financially blackmailing our parents, and said that he just wanted a good chance to propose because he was afraid his girlfriend might leave him soon. I told him that was his problem, not mine because my wedding day is not about him, and if he tries to propose at my wedding, I will have him thrown out. That's not a maybe, but a definite. Besides, I doubt his girlfriend would appreciate her proposal followed up with being tossed out by a bouncer. He yelled that this was why his parents never loved me and why they also called me a mistake behind my back. I was pretty hurt by that, but it wasn't things I didn't already know. In the end, he went crying to our grandmother, so she called me to try to convince me to let him propose. Turns out, my brother completely changed the story to make me out to be this huge villain who called him every name in the book. Even after I told her the real story, she still sided with him. That just goes to show how deep his golden child syndrome goes. She tried to hold her ground, but the verbal backlash I ended up giving her left her crying. That got back to my parents, who were pissed at me for taking things so far. But I told them I only went that far because I had to when they were all trying to get me to let my brother use my wedding as his springboard for a proposal. They ended up agreeing with me, but still stated they feel like I'm crass. My brother showed up at my home again to scream at me that I'm an a-hole, and I hope I'm happy with myself for not allowing him the opportunity. As for my fiancée, she knows what my brother is trying to do and she's very angry about it. She's almost ready to have him uninvited if he pursues this any further. Normally I have a very mild temper. But when it comes to certain people like my brother, parents and grandmother, I can easily get short with them because of all the past favoritism. My grandmother especially. She always sided with my brother and believed his lies no matter what he did. She's the biggest reason my parents favored my brother too. Anyway, I ended up speaking with my brother again and threatened to tell his girlfriend if he was still intending to propose at my wedding without permission. He took it poorly and called me an awful person, so I pointed out that my wedding isn't about him. Our parents were there for this, and they backed me up. I think my brother did a double take when they did that. My dad pointed out that he'd raised my brother wrong, and that was on him. So, from now on my brother was to show them real respect, and they wanted to get an official lease drawn up for him to pay proper rent and utilities because my brother was living with them for free. If he chooses not to pay, he can move out and they'll rent his room to someone else. My brother turned to our mom for help, but she just agreed with dad. He looked like he was having a conniption and then left the house. We only found out where he went 2 days later because he announced that he was moving in with grandma because she invited him. Our parents basically told him that if he wants to live with her, then to go ahead. My brother responded to this by saying we all hate him for just wanting to propose to his girlfriend. My parents pointed out that it's not that he wanted to propose, but where he wanted to do it, and he'd get no support for it. He's refusing to talk to our parents now. My grandmother did call me again, but I told her he wasn't proposing at my wedding so he can get it or not come, and the same goes for her. I ended up calling her out on her favoritism towards my brother since we were kids, which she tried to deny at first, but couldn't keep doing because of how much I'd pointed out. She ended up crying again while I told her that if she keeps trying to insist on this, then she won't be coming to my wedding. She begged me not to rescind her invitation, but still said she doesn't understand why I couldn't let my brother have his way before ending the call. My fiancé is fully ready to remove my brother and grandmother from the wedding. My mom called me the other day to tell me she spoke with my grandmother. She had told her everything I had said in our conversation, and my mom finally saw that she had favored my brother a little too much. She ended up tearing my brother a new a-hole, but he still tried to justify himself to her. That's when she told him they were through and cut all contact with him. My brother of course blamed me. Even though his girlfriend said that she's been ready to leave him for a while now, and if he tried to propose, no matter where, she'd have told him no. He is now boycotting my wedding, which is honestly for the best. I said I wouldn't miss him, and that he's in his 30s now and needs to grow up. Our parents have cut the umbilical cord and are no longer supporting him. They're already planning on renting his room to someone else because they need the money after the financial hole he left them in after dropping out of college, just to do mooch off them for a while and then get a degree with online college later, and not paying any rent while also making them pay for his food and utilities despite having a good paying job. They spent the world on him and he wasn't the least bit grateful. That made my brother just shut down and leave my home. Since then we have not heard a peep out of him. Today I messed up by swapping drinks. My girlfriend's been telling me that I have a serious drinking problem and that she'd leave me for it if I didn't get sober. Like she asked, I've been sober for 7 months now, but it's not exactly how you think. When I was drinking I was constantly tired after work. I didn't have any energy to give her the attention she needed, if you know what I mean. My testosterone levels dropped, I was constantly depressed, and my anxiety was through the roof. I wouldn't go to parties, the club, and sometimes it was so bad I would cry in fear before going to the gym. My girlfriend is a nutritionist and she told me that it was my coffee drinking. She told me I needed to quit coffee permanently or find an alternative that'll start to actually benefit me, like caffeine gum or Red Bull, so I'd be let down slowly. After I quit coffee I started going through some bad withdrawal. Everything continued to feel worse and worse. I couldn't take it anymore, so I needed to drink coffee without going against my girlfriend's wishes. After scouring the internet I found Alpha Grind from Amazon. It's a testosterone boosting coffee and is just a perfect amount of coffee that won't make me crash when I'm awake, helps stimulate my brain so I get the focus and discipline I need, and best of all, the gains have never been more crazy. Ever since I started drinking it, my pumps after the gym have never looked more insane. I come out looking and feeling like a demigod, and that one day I might become one. The problem was I had to hide this from my girlfriend. I plan on making her my wife and I'm not ready to lose her. One day we were driving in our city for our morning walks and we passed by Starbucks and she talked about how badly she wanted to have some but understood that she didn't want to trigger me. I assured it was okay and I'd just get a decaf coffee. When we got there she went to the bathroom. I quickly got my Alpha Grind tub from my car and asked the barista if he could brew it for me and put it in my order instead of the decaf. He agreed and I tipped him well. When my girlfriend came back and we drank the coffee I noticed this wasn't my usual taste at all. Before I could say anything she already finished up the entire cup. I accidentally swapped the Alpha Grind coffee for hers. An hour later she decided she didn't want to go for a walk anymore and wanted to go to the gym. When I tell you she did an entire hour on the Stairmaster, it was unbelievable. I tapped out after 7 minutes. She asked me she didn't understand why she had so much energy but she was craving more. I had to sit her down and confess to her. I told her I was secretly drinking Alpha Grind behind her back but I had done all my research beforehand. Surprisingly, she read through the reviews and contents and she approved of me drinking it. So much so that she started drinking it herself. But things started getting weird afterwards. With all the testosterone boost she started getting from the coffee, our time in bed has been getting rougher and rougher. She's been pinning me, choking me, and slapping around. I kind of like it. We've been experimenting with gags and belts, but last night I drew the line. She pulled out a strap. Am I the a-hole for telling my mother-in-law she gave up her family and it's her fault she's alone? My husband and I've been married for 6 years, at least 5 of those have been almost no contact with his mother. I don't know the whole story, but his dad passed away when he was young, and his mom remarried a man who was horribly abusive to my husband up until he moved out. He tried to tell his mother for years, but she just wouldn't believe it. It got to the point that for his own well-being he just couldn't be around her anymore. My husband had to suffer berating, physical mistreatment, even a broken rib one time, and she still would not believe it. This week, after years of silence, she shows up at our doorstep. She said she'd tried to call, but we have her blocked, so obviously it didn't go through. She was in tears and started crying about how her husband had trashed her house and left her, and she realized her son was telling the truth, how she didn't have anyone, all that stuff. She begged to talk to my husband. I dropped my jaw at her first, then collected my thoughts, and went off at her. I said that she had some nerve coming to our house to cry after throwing her son to the side for a disgusting coward willing to hurt children until that stopped working for her. I said she made her bed, now is the time to lay in it, and it wasn't going to be in my house. She was almost hysterical when she left. Her coming to the door put my husband in a panic attack, he's been too depressed to get out of bed since. Seeing her made him slump back into the mental health issues he has been doing a really good job of overcoming. I really don't care for that woman, but when I replay it in my head I feel absolutely terrible. Berating someone in tears never feels good, and now I think I might have just made things worse. My parents are starving me. So, for a bit of background, I, 16, am autistic and have chronic pain in my hips and legs, so I can't stand or walk for a long time if it's not a good day. I have super lousy texture issues, which doesn't allow me to eat anything with even the most minor ingredients, such as onions, mushrooms, and olives unless it's something specific like stroganoff. 3 things that get my texture issues going bad are tacos, chicken breast, and chili. The chili is too wet and has too many tomatoes. Chicken breast is dehydrated, and the way my mom makes it makes the bone hot, and tacos. Tacos are just no. It's pretty simple to make things that I like. My parents rarely buy snacks I can eat because they're too expensive. No one ever makes breakfast or lunch, so I'm typically left to fend for myself, and supper seems to always be one of 5 things, counting the wrong 3. For the past 4 days, I've been either without supper or with a tiny dinner. Day 1, me and my mom went to a Chinese buffet because we were out of town. I suddenly got nauseous because I had been walking all day, it had been a good day, so I couldn't eat much. On day 2, they were having tacos, so my mom made me 2 mini burgers smaller than the size of my hand. Usually, my mom doesn't make me anything on the side. Day 3, we had been out all day, and I had accidentally fallen asleep at 4 p.m., only waking up at 9 p.m. My parents did not save any supper for me. On day 4, my mom accidentally ordered pizza, all 3 with things that horribly set off my sensory issues. One is covered in peppers and onions, one is covered in onions, olives, tomatoes, and mushrooms, one is covered in artichoke which I didn't realize would be as bad until I took a bite and had to spit it out. All 4 days I've been able to count on one hand what I've had to eat. Today was a bit better because we were helping out my brother in town, so I managed to swindle my mom into getting fast food for lunch. Today, my mom told me she had gotten a pizza I happen to really enjoy, and I was like, sick. I get to have supper tonight, and I get to have breakfast and lunch tomorrow. And I was really excited about that. Only to go out to the kitchen and find that all 3 were ones I couldn't eat. I took 2 slices of the ones I thought I could eat and only managed to eat 1, and I took the plate back. I opened the fridge and couldn't find anything that would be simple to make or eat. We usually only have ingredients, which doesn't mesh well with my cooking abilities and my hip. I couldn't find anything, and I closed the door in a heated rage. Immediately, my mom yelled, "My name, stop it." And my father told his mother, "Jesus Christ, this fucking kid." Now, this kind of set me off, so I stomped my way back to my room. I tracked down the man who unalived my wife. My life was the love of my life, yet due to stress of our jobs we had grown apart. The distance was cold. I clocked out of work one day and as I drove home, I could only think about my wife. I thought about how we could fix our marriage. When I got home there was a police car in my driveway, yellow crime scene tape across my front door. "Mr. Hartman?" The officer instructed me to sit on the front of his hood. "What's going on?" "I'm Officer Bradley. Tonight, there was a break-in at your house. We're still figuring out the details, but your wife has been unalived." "No. I just saw her this morning." My whole world stopped. He handed me a business card. "This is a grief counselor. We recommend you contact them." "Mr. Hartman, I have to ask, did your wife have any enemies?" "Enemies? Nothing appears to be taken from the house. Could she have been having an affair?" I barely can babble answers to him. "Enemies? Affairs? Did I really let her slip away so far?" Officer Bradley instructs me to grab any essentials in the house and stay in a hotel tonight, in case the person returns. In the house, seeing all her stuff, I start crying. She was just here. Her phone's oddly laying on the ground. Did she try to call the police? I enter her password and check. There are 2 recent messages from an unknown number. One is an address. The second says, "Stupid beach, pay up or die." My sorrow turns to rage. I decide I'm not going to show this to Officer Bradley. I go to Walmart, the only place open, and buy an aluminum bat and a length of rope. Whoever this man is, he won't expect me. I'll have the element of surprise. Knock him out, tie him up, and get him to confess. Unalive him when I'm done. The address in her phone was a condemned warehouse. Perfect place to commit a crime. I drive to this warehouse and slip through a hole that's been cut in the fence and find a door. What do you know, It's open. Inside it's dark. Electricity courses through my veins. I'm on the ground and feel the cold metal of handcuffs locking my wrists together. I told you he would fall for it. For being so rich he's so stupid. I look up to see my wife and Officer Bradley there together. Bradley is tying the rope I bought around my neck. He brought a rope? This is perfect. We'll unalive him here, then plant the body at your house. Overworked husband goes through with aside. It's easy. After I get all his money, we'll get married. But I was going to fix things? I love my wife. The rope gets tight, and I begin to fade. Am I the a-hole for telling my best friend she's acting too much like a girl? I had a friend in high school named Jane. Jane and I were pretty close, and in all honesty, I thought that she was the coolest girl ever. She was chill, low maintenance, and didn't care about looking pretty with makeup, nails, or dressing up, which was a stark contrast to the majority of the girls in our school. She also liked sports, specifically NCAA football and video games. She was also really nice and didn't take herself too seriously. She and I were really close, and she was also close to my other friends and we hung out a lot. Jane also had some girlfriends too, but I'm not sure what that dynamic was like, especially since Jane didn't seem like she shared many of their interests. After high school, Jane and I went to different colleges. We didn't really talk much after, and Jane didn't have social media, so I couldn't keep up with her. Fast forward to sometime last week. I was at a local county fair with my brother when a girl came up to me and said hi. It was Jane. I was shocked because she looked nothing like the girl I knew from high school. She was wearing a dress, was wearing heavy makeup, and had fake nails on. I expressed that it was nice to see her, but I asked what happened to her. Jane didn't know what I was talking about, so I explained that she looked different. Jane laughed and responded that this was her new style. I asked her why she changed herself so much, to which she asked me if I didn't like her new look. I was honest and told her that I didn't, and that whatever she is now isn't the girl that I knew 4 years ago. Jane became upset with me and said that she was the same girl, but I didn't believe her, since the old Jane liked to sit down and play Mario Kart with me. Jane claimed that she still liked those things, but she had other interests now. She said that I was being kind of a PP, which pissed me off, so I responded that she wasn't cool anymore, and that's what bothers me the most. I think I may have gone too far, but at the same time, it bothers me a lot that Jane is abandoning her old self and is turning into every other girl that I pretty much scoffed at in high school. My partner slapped a baby. When I was in my late 20s, I had a new job taking care of newborn babies at the hospital. I'd been there for about 3 weeks when something effed up happened. I had a partner with me in the nursery, and we had a 12-month-old baby in our care. My partner called her over to play with her, and then she did something horrible. She hit the baby right across the face. I couldn't believe my eyes. I asked her if she had really just hit the baby. She admitted it, but she blamed the baby, saying the baby had pinched her. I knew I had to do something, and luckily, the owner of the center was still around. I had another staff member call the owner to our room. My partner was pleading with me not to tell anyone, but I couldn't let this slide. The owner came to our room, and my partner started crying. The owner asked what happened, and I explained everything. The baby had been on one side of the puzzle table, and my partner called them to the other side. Instead of helping, she hit the baby hard across the face. The owner asked me to write up an incident report, which I did. I also made a copy for myself because I'd learned from a past experience that having a copy is important. A week went by, and I was still working with my partner. I was very uncomfortable because I felt like I had to watch her all the time. I asked the owner what was happening, and she said they were going to let my partner go, but they needed to hire a replacement first. I didn't believe this was right because I knew there were other child care workers looking for jobs. After 2 more weeks of working with my partner, I told the owner that I couldn't work with her anymore. She offered to move me to a different room, but I refused. I didn't want to leave my babies with my partner. That night, I called Child Protective Services, CPS, licensing, and the police. The police took my statement and said they'd look into it. I gave them a copy of the incident report with both mine and the director's signatures. The next morning, a police officer arrived and spoke with the owner. She denied the incident had ever happened and accused me of making a false report. But I had my copy of the incident report as proof. The officer assured me that they would deal with the owner and get in touch with me later. I wondered if this might go to court and if my partner would lose her job or face charges. My boyfriend made me get an abortion, so I got pregnant in secret. About 4 months ago, I, 20F, found out that I was pregnant from a random pregnancy test. I was on the phone with my friend who was talking about the fact that her boyfriend's condom broke. She was going through a scare. I had a box already because I'm allergic to latex and he, 21 meters, didn't like condoms, so I was just on birth control. I peed in the cup, did the test and walked around ignoring it until I remembered it like 15 minutes later, picked up, glanced at it, it said positive, and I proceeded to panic. I did everything I could to try to reverse it, show it's not true anything. It was real. I sent my boyfriend at the time a picture of the test and we went from there. He was no support, wouldn't talk about it, wouldn't even think about any outcome. I was afraid and alone, and we were borderline homeless even though I was working over 50 hours a week due to him getting only 18. I had the stress of also having to come home to clean and cook and take care of the dogs, and then I was screamed at for sleeping too much. It was all too much, so I googled my options 3 days after I found out. There were websites where they just ship you the meds with instructions for about $90 maybe. We didn't speak about what was going on, only he knew my decision and was happy about it. After that, we didn't speak about it till the pills arrived. It was his birthday 4 days after they arrived, so the day we decided to celebrate I was bleeding a crap ton, couldn't stand without feeling blood shoot out of me, was in constant pain, couldn't keep food down, Just wanted to sleep, but I decorated and cooked and took care of him when he got too drunk. It was the most draining thing I've ever put my body through, but I did it. It was done. I wasn't gonna have a baby anymore. Then the dreams started, dreams that felt like days, years even, that would go by, where we got married and had our baby and raised her, and I went back to school and he went back to wielding. It's the most heartbreaking thing I've ever seen, and it all felt so real. It haunted me, it still does. To know what my baby looks like, smells like, their laugh, to know it but also know you'll never really hear it. KLLS me. So I shut down, I worked more, I slept more, I ate more, I was angry. I was so mad that I was the one to take away something so precious from my own life before I even gave myself the chance to think about it. I was scared and alone. In love with a man who wouldn't hold me through my pain and wouldn't talk about him if he was feeling it. He got angrier and drunker, I got cold and fixated on everything being a certain way. Fixated on being stable so I wouldn't have to make that choice again, I could just start nursery shopping. It's been about 4 months since I had an abortion and I miss my baby every day. My ex is long gone, and he did so much, but the only thing that still hurts is him not supporting me, not talking to me, or giving me comfort. I miss my baby. I miss the boy I never met. I miss the odd feeling in my stomach that something isn't right and I'm not quite alone. What my ex-boyfriend at the time didn't know was that he got me pregnant, on the last day we were together. I'm going through with this one, and I can't wait until he gets the childcare payments notice in 9 months. Have you ever felt a deep personal connection to a person you met in a dream only to wake up feeling terrible because you realized they never existed? My last semester at a certain college, I was assaulted by a football player for walking where he was trying to drive. He was 325 pounds and I was 120 pounds. While unconscious on the ground, I lived a different life. I met a wonderful young lady, she made my heart skip and my face red. I pursued her for months and dispatched a few jerk boyfriends before I finally won her over. After 2 years we got married and almost immediately she bore me a daughter. I had a great job and my wife didn't have to work outside of the house. When my daughter was 2, my wife bore me a son. My son was the joy of my life. I would walk into his room every morning before I left for work and doted on him and my daughter. One day while sitting on the couch I noticed that the perspective of the lamp was odd, like inverted. It was still in 3D but, just, wrong. I was transfixed, I couldn't look away from it. I stayed up all night staring at it. The next morning I didn't go to work, something was just not right about that lamp. I stopped eating, I left the couch only to use the bathroom at first, soon I stopped that too as I wasn't eating or drinking. I stared at the effing lamp for 3 days before my wife got really worried. She had someone come and try to talk to me. By this time my cognizance was breaking up and my wife was freaking out. She took the kids to her mother's house just before I had my epiphany. The lamp is not real. The house is not real, my wife, my kids. None of that is real. The last 10 years of my life are not effing real. The lamp started to grow wider and deeper. It was still inverted dimensions. It took up my entire perspective and all I could see was red. I heard voices, screams, all kinds of weird noises and I became aware. A effing shit ton of pain. The first words I said were, "I'm missing teeth," and opened my eyes. I was laying on my back on the sidewalk surrounded by people that I didn't know. Lots were freaking out. I was completely confused. At some point a cop scooped me up, dragged me across the sidewalk and grass and threw me face down in the back of a cop car. I was still confused. I was taken to the hospital by the cop. Seems he didn't want to wait for the ambulance to arrive and given CT scans and shit. I went through about 3 years of horrid depression. I was grieving the loss of my wife and children and dealing with the knowledge that they never existed. I was scared that I was going insane as I would cry myself to sleep hoping I would see her in my dreams. I never have, but sometimes I see my son, usually just a glimpse out of my peripheral vision. He is perpetually 5 years old and I can never hear what he says. I found out my mom has lied to me all my life and my real dad just showed up for the first time. I went home and talked to my mom. I was much calmer with a clearer head and was ready to hear what she had to say. I probably learned more than anyone should ever have to about their own conception. Turns out my father really isn't an abusive ex. My mom didn't cheat on my adoptive dad or anything shady like that. I'm just the product of a one-night stand. My mom said she went out drinking by herself at a bar and met my dad who was celebrating his 25th birthday alone. She said she had just been dumped by her fiancé a week before that because she had learned from her doctor that it was virtually impossible for her to have children naturally. She said her and my dad used a rubber and yet somehow she still got pregnant with me and I'm her miracle baby considering the circumstances. She went back to the hotel that he took her to after she found out she was pregnant, but they couldn't find any info on my dad ever staying there. He didn't give her his actual first name. She said this was before social media was a thing, so she couldn't just search him online like we can do nowadays. So she decided she would just raise me on her own. She also admitted she panicked when my bio dad showed up because to her he was literally just a guy she knew for one night 17 years ago. She didn't really know who he was now, or if he was going to try to get custody of me, or if I was going to want to run away with him. She admits she could have been calmer from the beginning and maybe we could have all talked and sorted it out that night, but I don't blame her for it. As for my adoptive dad, she said she didn't meet him until I was almost 2. They got married when I was 3. He officially adopted me after they got married. She showed me the adoption certificate. Reflecting on it now I realize I've never seen pictures of him and I when I was a baby. Just pictures of me as a toddler and up. She said he accepted me as his own and loved me and was a father to me. I told her my bio dad showing up doesn't rewrite history. I'll never not see my adoptive dad as my father. If anything it makes me love him even more that he treated and loved me as his own flesh and blood. I also ended up talking to my dad. He left his number which my mom gave to me. We met up for lunch. He confirmed my mom's whole story. I gave him crap about using a fake name. It wasn't so cut and dry. He said he goes by his middle name, which is what he told her that night. He showed me his business card, which does have the name he told my mom that night. And I've since looked him up, and his entire online presence uses his middle name. Apparently he only goes by his actual first name for legal and business reasons, like checking into a hotel. He said that night he was depressed that his best friend didn't live to celebrate their 25th birthday together, and that's why he drove to our town to get away from everyone and everything back home for a night. He apologized a million times and said he would have been in my life if he had known, especially because I inherited a medical condition from him and it really sucked dealing with that and having to learn to adjust to it alone. He was diagnosed with it when he was 19, so he knew what I went through. I could tell he genuinely felt awful about it. I asked him how he even found out about me, and apparently he has a son who is only 5 months younger than me. So his ex-wife, the son's mom, is a teacher, and she saw a picture that my school's website posted of the academic team I'm on. She had sent it to my dad thinking I might be related to him cause we look so alike. He said he has a brother he hasn't spoken to in over 20 years, so they both initially thought I could be his nephew, but he found my Instagram, and he said when he saw a picture of me and my mom on it he instantly recognized her and he knew I was his. Also, he did not cheat on his ex-wife with my mom. He didn't meet her until a couple months after the night with my mom. He even admitted they only got married because she got pregnant early in the relationship and they're divorced now because they're not actually compatible. He offered proof and to even call her himself right there to confirm, but I told him it wasn't necessary. He had visited my mom earlier the day that he visited me at work and confirmed with her even though he already knew between my face and the math lining up. But he said he went to my workplace anyway because even though he had seen pictures of me, he said he had to see me for himself in person. He said we still need to do a DNA test to establish paternity and so he can add me on his insurance. But between our faces, my birth date, and us having the same rare medical condition, it's obvious he's my dad. Even the waitress made a nonchalant comment about us being father and son. He asked if we could start having visits to get to know each other, and of course I said yes. I want to know him. Even though I still feel some anger at him, I want to have him in my life. My mom said I can't go to his house for Christmas or even at all until she feels comfortable with me leaving to visit him. But she said he can come visit on Christmas night and we'd go from there. At the end of lunch I brought out my debit card to pay for my half of the meal. I didn't really know what the etiquette is for a first lunch with a bio parent as a teenager. He just laughed and said I'm his son and I don't ever have to pay for anything when I'm with him. That made me feel really good. And then he made a joke about owing my mom 17 years of child support anyway, which really just eased the whole situation. He walked with me to my car and gave me a hug, which made me start crying. I know it's cringy and I was embarrassed that I was crying in the middle of a diner parking lot, but I just felt an instant connection to him when he hugged me, even though he's still basically a stranger to me. He said some stuff to me while he was hugging me and just let me cry for a couple minutes. Am I the a-hole for leaving my girlfriend's birthday dinner because she was ignoring me? I'm wondering if I did something wrong when I left my girlfriend's birthday dinner. We've been dating for a year and a half, and her 21st birthday was last week. I planned a nice dinner and a movie night for her. The dinner was at her favorite restaurant, and she wanted her friends Sarah and Kim to join us. I initially wanted it to be just the two of us, but I agreed to invite her friends to make her happy. We arrived at the restaurant at 6, but Sarah and Kim were late, which wasn't surprising since they're often tardy. After we got our food, my girlfriend and her friends started chatting and mostly ignored me. I tried to join their conversation, but they didn't pay much attention to me. This went on for about 30 minutes. I felt left out, so I asked for a to-go container for my food and the bill for our meals. I paid the bill and left without saying much to them. When I got home, I had dozens of texts and missed calls from my girlfriend and her friends, but I didn't respond. I put away the decorations and the cake in the freezer and went to work on my truck in the garage. I had a part that needed installing, and I wanted to get it done. While I was in the garage, Kim dropped my girlfriend off at my place. My girlfriend seemed like she'd had a few drinks. She came in and started yelling at me for ruining her birthday. I explained that I left because they were ignoring me, and I didn't feel welcome. She called me childish, and we got into an argument. I told her that I wouldn't stay somewhere I wasn't wanted, and she accused me of not saying anything before leaving. I argued that they wouldn't have listened anyway. She pointed at my truck and said I'd left her dinner to work on my project. I explained that I was fixing a problem with my truck and that I didn't spend as much as she claimed. She accused me of not caring about her on her special day, and I lost my temper. I raised my voice, which I'd never done before in our relationship. I told her she was being delusional and that I had planned the dinner and movie night for her. Her friends didn't arrange it, pay for it, or plan the movie night. After that, I told her that if she thought I didn't care, she should leave. She was crying, but I was frustrated and didn't seem to care. She called Kim to pick her up, and she went to her parents' house nearby to tell them what happened. Later, I received a call from her mom, who took her side, and her dad, who supported me. They wanted to know what happened. I explained the situation. So, I'm not sure if I did something wrong by leaving the dinner after feeling ignored. My husband cheated on me 4 years ago. I want to leave now. It all started with a seemingly perfect life. I was married to the man of my dreams, living in a comfortable house with a great group of friends. But little did I know, behind closed doors, my husband was brewing a storm of betrayal that would shake me to my core. I had a gut feeling that something was off, but like any trusting spouse, I brushed it off as mere paranoia. Until one day, I stumbled upon a series of incriminating text messages on his phone. They revealed the unthinkable truth. My husband had cheated on me 4 long years ago. Can you even begin to imagine the pain, the rage, the sheer betrayal that coursed through my veins? I felt like my whole world had shattered in an instant. It was a punch to the gut, a knife in the heart, and every emotion under the sun swirling in a hurricane of chaos. The anger that consumed me was indescribable. How dare he have the audacity to cheat and then keep it a secret for years? How could I have been so blind, so foolish? I was a seething volcano ready to erupt, and the eruption was long overdue. Now, I had a decision to make, to stay or to leave. Every fiber of my being wanted to pack my bags and walk away from this toxic betrayal. The trust was shattered, irreparable, and forgiveness seemed like a distant dream. But as I stared at the ruins of my once happy life, a fire ignited within me. I refused to be defined by my husband's infidelity. It was time to reclaim my power, to rebuild my life on my own terms. With a newfound strength, I confronted him head on. The tears fell, the screams echoed, and our once idyllic home became a battlefield. I demanded answers, explanations, anything that could fill the void in my heart. But all I got were empty apologies and feeble excuses. He couldn't even look me in the eye. In the midst of this emotional wreckage, our friends chose sides. Some stayed loyal to me while others defended my husband's actions. Lines were drawn, allegiances formed, and our once united circle was now fractured with tension and resentment. It was heartbreaking to witness friendships crumble under the weight of infidelity, and I couldn't help but feel like collateral damage in someone else's mess. But amidst the chaos, a glimmer of hope emerged. You see, just when I thought I couldn't trust anyone anymore, an unexpected ally revealed themselves. A high school classmate of mine resurfaced, reaching out through social media to offer a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. We had never been close back then, but this newfound connection provided solace and strength during the darkest moments of my life. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, I made a decision that would forever alter the course of my story. It was time to walk away, to leave the pain and betrayal behind. That ill-fated house had become a prison of memories, suffocating my spirit, and stifling my growth. I packed my bags, metaphorically and literally, taking with me lessons learned and newfound self-empowerment. Now, I stand before you, a survivor, ready to embrace the unknown and carve out a new path. The taste of freedom is bittersweet, lingering with the remnants of a past that still haunts me. But as I step into the realm of the uncertain, my head held high, I can't help but feel a sense of anticipation. The adventure awaits, and with it, the chance of a brighter future. But just when I thought I was in the clear, a chilling message from an unknown number revealed a dark secret, tying my husband's infidelity to a web of deceit and deception that threatens to unravel everything. I was left with more questions than answers, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to make sense of this new reality. The journey to healing had just taken an unexpected detour, and I found myself standing at the crossroads of uncertainty. What would this new path bring? Would I be able to put the pieces of my broken heart back together? Or would I be left in ruins? Only time will tell, dear readers, and I invite you to join me on this journey of self-discovery and healing. The future awaits, and I'm ready to embrace it with open arms. My girlfriend told me she was with a friend, but that friend was with me picking out an engagement ring. How do I confront my girlfriend about her lie? I swear my life feels like a movie right now. I'm 28 and plan on proposing to my girlfriend of 3 years. Now, I suck at picking out jewelry. I'm the type of guy that doesn't know anything about jewelry, and she always thinks what is picked out is ugly. So every time I want to buy something for my girl, I usually consult one of our mutual friends. I know all of her best friends, and we all get along well, so asking them for help picking out jewelry is something I'm used to, and usually, it's not a secret and my girlfriend is fine with it. When picking out an engagement ring, I consulted my girlfriend's best friend, Justine. Justine knows my girlfriend better than anyone. So, when my girlfriend went out to visit her sister and baby nephew, I invited Justine over to help pick out a ring. Justine and I looked through a few catalogs, but decided it was a dead end and it would be better to go to professionals at a jewelry store. However, I didn't know when my girlfriend would be coming home, so I thought of a clever text to gauge how much time we had. I asked her when she'd be coming home, as I was ordering takeout and wanted to know when to tell them to have the food ready by. She responded by saying it would be a few hours. She met up with Justine to go shopping. Obviously, this took me by surprise since Justine was standing next to me. I showed Justine the text, and she looked as confused as I was. It isn't unusual for my girlfriend to meet up with people out of the blue like that for shopping and lunch. She's a very spontaneous person and loves making plans on the fly. So ordinarily, I would have believed this text in a heartbeat. However, obviously, this had to be a lie. When my girlfriend came home, she acted completely normal, and I played along, but it's been really hard to act like everything's fine. We got takeout, ate together, and cuddled on the couch after. So far, she's caught on a little that something is upsetting me, but I just can't tell her what. Looking at her kills me. I don't know what to do. My girlfriend and I have zero trust issues and we tell each other everything, so this lie is killing me. Has she always been lying? I want to ask her about it so bad, but if I tell her I knew she was lying, I'd have to explain why, and I really don't want to do that. What do I do? I know she lied to me, but I don't know how to confront her. Should I just forget it? This won't stop gnawing at me. Please help. What's the worst experience you've had as a mortician? Before COVID, I worked at a funeral home that wasn't particularly well run. I was a funeral assistant, and one of the embalmers was notoriously difficult to deal with. Her name was AJ. About 4 days before this story, AJ had picked up a deceased man who had died of septicemia and who was to be cremated due to the fact he was already in a bad state on death. So AJ had the brilliant idea to leave this gentleman on the rolling cot for 4 days unrefrigerated, figuring it wouldn't matter since he was being cremated and it was a slow week. Of course, I got the job of moving him to the crematory with AJ. We walked into the embalming room and found that the decedent had bloated and was leaking a gray liquid sludge out of his urinary catheter onto the floor. If pestilence had a smell, it would have been this liquid. It smelled like a warning to the base lizard part of my brain. To describe this liquid as smelling bad is an understatement. The liquid was something you could feel and sense in the air. AJ and I donned our gear, and luckily since she placed him on a cot already, we didn't have to do much in the way of moving the body. Unluckily, the cot was relatively old and one of the cot wheels had to be manually unlocked using hands, as the foot pedal was too rusted to effectively use. AJ told me to unlock it, and so I carefully bent down and unlocked the wheel. Well, AJ got the bright idea to shake the cot violently as some sort of prank, sending the gray liquid over the edge directly onto the top of my head, dripping down under my eye protection and mask. I closed my lips and eyes so the liquid running over them would stay out of my body, and calmly walked to the employee bathroom in a sort of numb state of shock. The funeral homeowner saw my sludgy appearance and sent me home paid for the rest of the day. My wife found out about my spontaneity prompts. So about 3 to 4 years ago my wife and I had a huge, near relationship ending, fight. It was mostly about how she feels I don't care about her. I get busy during the day and I forget to text her for hours at a time, and when I do it's the normal how's your day going stuff. So to fix this I made a list of 31 prompts or activities in my notes ranging from a simple I love you and can't wait to see you to getting flowers or planning a picnic at the park to surprise her with. I set a reminder in my phone to go off every 2 days and I will use the prompt that matches the day of the month so it feels random and not like I'm repeating the same stuff. If I think of something new I'll add it to the sublist and swap them around every few months. This has worked out pretty well. It's not that I don't mean these things, but I just need a reminder to pull me out of work mode for a few minutes to check in on her without having to resort to the same boring and generic texts. Fast forward to this weekend. I was doing some car maintenance, and I also have important information about the cars and a maintenance log in my notes as well, and while I was under the car I asked my wife to look at the notes and check the torque spec for a drain bolt. Naturally, she sees a note called spontaneity prompts and is curious so she opens that and sees a laundry list of romanticisms. She puts it together probably recognizing some of the things I've said to her that I've been using this to talk to her during the day. She asks about it and I say I reference it from time to time when I want to do something nice/random to surprise her or when I feel like saying something non-generic over text. She says I shouldn't need a list of things to talk to her about and suspects I just pulled a list of ideas off the internet, even though I made this list on my own. Edit, I'd like to take this opportunity to clear up a few things and answer some of the most repeated questions as I can't respond to every comment. My wife was upset at first because she felt my messages to her were somewhat disingenuous, but I explained that I mainly did this so I wouldn't forget to message her and would try to have something different to talk about. She understands, but I think I need to stop using the prompts for a while and just go from muscle memory when the reminders go off. Yes, she does work. She gets busy like I do and gets annoyed when she sends me a message and I don't respond for several hours. After all, she can make time so I should be able to as well, especially when I find time to do other things during the day. I'm more of an a-hole than she is. She's very kind, and she does random things for me all the time, but I'm not going into that for the sake of being family friendly. We've been together for a long time and she feels to some degree that there has to be some intensity to the love in the relationship or one day there won't be and that scares her, and we both have to be emotionally invested for her to be in it. She doesn't want to become complacent. 2. A lot of people were asking for a list. I'm not going to provide that unfortunately, but a few people suggested making an app, and I may try to do that. The work isn't in creating the list, that takes 5 minutes of thinking. The real work is in setting up and following through on doing this. Some examples are just saying I was thinking about you today and miss you, or sending a song saying this reminded me of you, that thing we did that one time / that's trip we took / that story your grandma always tells during holidays, or a dumb joke, or a picture of her that you like to show you took candid pictures and go back and look at them from time to time. It doesn't really matter what you say, just that you say something more than how's your day going, what did you have for lunch, what's for dinner, be home soon, and that you keep some form of consistency. If you can't come up with 10 to 20 ideas that you repeat, then you need to think about things you would like to hear from you so that would make you happy and try those. I just drank a little bit of my grandmother out of morbid curiosity. I think TikTok will have a kick with this. My mama passed away years ago when I was 12 and hit me severely in the gut with unresolved grief and depression. She has been cremated and my mom left me the responsibility to keep her urn in my room. I've since made her a shrine in her memory. My mom has now moved into a new place, now lives across the states, and I'm planning to visit her in the next week. She requested I bring some of mama to spread her ashes in the river nearby her new house. Usually she likes to do this when we find a new place or a beach to take a little bit of someone we held close to our memory. Now, this is the first time I've touched the urn. It's never been opened since her cremation. I, and my mother, are very spiritual people and I have the irrational fear that touching the urn somehow will cause some form of hex or misjudgment on my part, so I've never touched it. But I cannot take the entire thing with me, so I opened it and poured some into a tightly closed jar to take with on the trip. In order to get the ashes out, I used a smaller measuring cup to accurately get a portion out of the container. With this, a film of residue was left in the smaller jar. In my extremely emotional, vulnerable state and morbid curiosity, when I went to wash out the small jar, I took a few sips from the murky water. I've since put the urn back in its place and refused to look in my mama's direction. I feel so conflicted. This grief is coming back and now I feel a heavy sense of guilt and weight. hate, like a children who accidentally broke a vase. I'm not sure if I'm overreacting or I truly just did something back. Parts of me wish I never did this and told my mom I couldn't promise her wish. The other part of me is conflicted with the immoral action that I committed a meager act of cannibalism, if it's even considered to be that anymore. I'm lost, confused, and now thrown back into a state of grief as if a part of my very dead mama has risen from the dead and has come back to haunt me for this stupid action.
I think I saw my dad testing my nephew. This is hard to start because I am having a lot of trouble typing this out. I'm 22 female, youngest of 5 siblings. My oldest brother is married with a 3-year-old son. He is the joy of my family's world. I do not live at home. I'm in college about 4 hours away, but my parents live about 2 minutes from my brother and his family. I'd like to preface all of this by saying that I love my family so much, but I have always had issues feeling uncomfortable around my father since I was a teenager. He is a very goofy person but has his typical spits of hot-headedness, but my sister and I have talked plenty of times about how snoopy, sneaky and gross our dad can sound. He will comment about women's, ours included, bodies and make it seem casual when really it just makes him sound so creepy. I've tried to chalk a lot of it up to him being older and out of touch with keeping his mouth shut, but I get very uncomfortable just because I can feel my dad's eyes sometimes and I always cover up around him. But I also have realized I have had trust issues with my dad for a while and do not want to presume he is as uncomfortable as I feel he is sometimes. That being said, I was home this whole past week after my semester of classes ended. My brother and his wife had multiple plans throughout the week and my parents are always willing to watch my nephew while they get some time to themselves. My nephew is coming up on his terrible 3 years, so I can see how he fails to listen a lot and can throw tantrums sometimes, but I've noticed how my dad has been so controlling with him to understand things that is just not going to make sense to a child. My mom and I try and tell my dad to calm down, but my dad insists that he never raised any of us children to just do as we please and boss everyone around. This is more of the tip of the iceberg that has caused me to observe my dad and how he acts with my nephew, but what has really gotten to me has been the touching I have seen from my dad. I can't even wrap my head around what I'm typing, but I saw him lift my nephew up and do a circular motion with his hand in a rough manner around my nephew's you-know-what. I tried to dismiss this, but then I noticed how often my dad would quickly volunteer and almost insist on changing his diaper even when I said I would do it and that it was no big deal. After that I started to feel more and more anxious and noticed that even when putting his bathing suit on, he would have to take him to another room to lay him down to get the suit on, but if it was any other one of us, I know we would have just helped him change in the living room. But yesterday, all my family was over. Most of my siblings are married and my nephew was wearing a diaper-like swimsuit that buttons in multiple places on the sides. It can fill with water, but it's supposed to hold a number 2 if he goes while swimming. We were all out there in the pool, but my dad and my nephew were in the hot tub, which is raised out of the ground to the side of the pool. I was initially in the hot tub with the two of them when I wondered out loud if he had maybe gone poop in his swimsuit. Then I jumped into the pool right after that. When I came out of the water, I looked to the side of the hot tub, which was blocking the view from my other family members, and saw my dad roughly unbuttoning the front of my nephew's suit in the front, which is unnecessary to feel for poop. And I couldn't believe it, but my dad kept grabbing the thing. It must have happened 3 times. It was like he was flicking it almost. I just exclaimed, "Dad, what are you doing?" But I couldn't even get myself to look at my dad's face, so I got out of the pool and went inside. I left immediately this morning, but I can't comprehend what to even do. I feel so incredibly angry, and traumatized and bitter. I want to do something about it, but I don't know what to do. I'm afraid I'll be wrong and just look crazy, but I'm afraid to be right and ruin my family. Please, where do I even begin in knowing what to do?
Men of Reddit, what are some romantic gestures that girls do that completely melt your heart? Close and emotionally charged hugs, when she buries herself in my chest or neck, makes me feel all strong and protective and absolutely melts me. I'm legally blind in my right eye, and one girl I was dating always made a point to get seats on the right side of theaters so that I'd be able to see everything without turning my head. Really simple, but it blew me away when I caught on to her. When she quietly sits down next to me and snuggles in. Effort. Your significant other may not know exactly what you want or need, but as long as they try, that feels nice. On Valentine's Day, or maybe it was our anniversary, she gave me a deck of cards labeled 52 Things I Love About You, and each card had some unique little quirk of mine. Half of them were things I didn't even realize I did. Absolutely melted my heart. We're not dating anymore, but I still hang on to that deck of cards, even though now it just makes me profoundly sad. What do all women do but never admit to? When was the last time you washed your bra? Those farts that bubble to the front. During our showers our hair goes to our ass cracks, so we spend a good minute pulling it out. Casually hold own breasts. I pick my wedgies in public all the time, but here I am admitting it. The same way guys sometimes adjust their swords and balls, we sometimes adjust our labia. I fondle myself without realizing. Not in a SX way, but I like to play with my folds like I would play with the springy thing behind the bathroom door. Watch the blood clot strip out of me after taking out a tampon in the morning. Spending 98% of our fertile life praying we don't get pregnant and the other 2%